why it's really important to have a plan and understand what your goals are.
In fact, my camel out there is suffering right now with a broken back.
So I actually found Pepe when it was only a couple of hours old, and I'm like, oh, this is a funny meme.
Oh my god.
Yo! Who is this degen?
The old man is swing trading over years at a time. And it's like, that's where the real money is made.
The answer is a permanent loss. With single-sided staking, you don't have to worry about impermanent loss.
But really, at the end of the day, it's just the matter of a macro market. It's just what happens.
If you're aware, if you're disciplined, you can hone that into further financial growth.
Financial freedom, so we can actually live life and not have to be constantly living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's the ultimate goal, more or less, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, crypto degenerates, ducks and squirrels, welcome to this special episode of the Degen Roundtable Book Club. We're going to be covering the Ethereum white paper tonight. Joining me is the fantastic ascending man, Mr. Nate Magetta, and I'm your host, Mr. Will Stevenson. For the folks at home who don't know, Nate Magetta is one of the Degen Roundtable's fantastic and awesome networkers, goes around, meets people, shakes hands, kisses babies, does all that great thing, finds out what's going on in different communities, and does a whole bunch of networking stuff. I am just the Degen Roundtable's one of our hosts, and I roam around the states building TV towers, and in my free time, I talk cryptocurrency to degenerates such as yourselves. Nate, broski, it's good to see you, man. Right. You had in the green room, I was like screaming at you for like the last 15 minutes, and you weren't responding. I was like, what the hell's going on? And then I saw you, like, you popped out and in and out and in. I was like, fuck it, we're fucking rolling. So, bro, what's new and exciting with you? How you doing, man?
Well, I'm doing an experiment today. So I'm actually, as of right now, I'm currently streaming to YouTube, to X, to Kick, and to Twitch all at the same time. And so there was a lot of like crossing of the streams that I had to go deal with. And then the other thing too is I can't really see the comments right now, so I guess I won't be commenting, and anything that pops up, that's where I'll be able to see them. So you know, we're starting out, ladies and gentlemen. We're starting something brand new over here. But hey, you know what? I'm here to talk to you. We can go through this white paper, have a good time. You know, it'll be a good time. Oh yeah, I've also got myself some mushroom coffee right here because apparently I'm getting very tired because I've done a lot of things today. After this show, my brain's probably going to shut down entirely.
I don't blame you, broski. I will say, you're coming in a little, like your video quality is a little bit grainier, and I think that's probably because you're streaming to so many different platforms. So
probably,
I've pulled up so I can see it in StreamYard, and I've got a separate tab over here that shows me our YouTube feed. And you know, like normal, it's got that 7-second delay. And the video quality is a little bit grainier, but like we can still hear you just fine, and we can see like generally pretty much everything that's going on. On your side, does it look like you're streaming at like 480 pixels or 360 pixels or something like that?
Yeah. No, it's showing up good on everything else. Yeah, except for the YouTube side of things. That's weird.
Well, I mean, it is what it is, I suppose. We'll figure it out. We can still see you. It's getting better now.
Yeah.
So
well, like I said, you know, this is it's a brand new thing. Might as well try it out, see how it kind of goes, you know.
Hell yeah, bro. I like it. The Kick streaming. I've thought about making a Twitch account and then doing some other stuff. So that's fantastic. So I want to learn more about this mushroom coffee stuff. And apparently so do some of the folks in the audience. Before we get to the mushroom coffee and to the Ethereum white paper, we're going to do a quick round of motherfucking chat shoutouts, everyone's favorite part of the day. It's time for announcements and chat shoutouts and interacting with you guys that are so awesome as to interact with us. Starting the show off, we've got Mr. Nate, the Ascending Man himself, saying it's another white paper for you guys. Yes, absolutely right.
Oh,
it is another white paper. We're going to have a fun time reading it. I did ask ChatGPT to kind of like dumb it down for the common man and explain to me the different sections. So I'll be going through that first, and then we'll actually delve into the meat and potatoes of everything. But then, oh no, we lost it. We lost you, Nate. Oh man. So I'm gonna add. Okay, there you go. I got you again. For some reason, device not connected. Okay, I don't know. it's removing your camera from the stream. I don't know if you can hear me right now, Nate, but you're still on
I
StreamYard.
can hear you. You can hear me too.
Okay.
My
Yeah.
camera is just dying, I guess.
Yeah, it's saying that device not connected, so like I'm not able to add you up to the screen when it does that, but we'll figure it out. Anyways, so for the first chat shoutouts of the night, we've got Kenturian54X, more white papers. I thought you guys would be more inclusive. Good sir. The second that they come out with Eskimo papers and black papers and Mexican papers and Australian papers, I will be happy to read them. But so far, all that we've got is white paper. So all I got to say is, hey, if you want more inclusive papers, then they need to be written. Like it's all that exists. So there you go, Mr. Kenturian 54X. Next up, he says, "What's up, D-Gens?" And we're also joined by Miss Amber Simon. Shout out to Amber Simon. Good to see you. As well as my buddy, Mr. Slide 180, my good friend Josh, saying, "Let's fucking go. Let's go, amigo." Glad that we could have you with us tonight as well. Hopefully you can learn some stuff about crypto if you're interested. And then Amber comes back by saying that mushroom coffee is my daily routine necessity for functioning properly. Oh no, and I've lost Nate completely. So we don't have Nate with us, but we do have friendship and we do have everything else going on. So I suppose that I will have a drink for all of my folks at home. Actually, no, I can't have a drink because I'm the only one on stage. And so if I'm not talking, then we don't hear anything. Oh, never mind. There we go. We've got Nate again. Mr. Nate Mageddit, can you tell us a little bit about mushroom coffee, good sir? Because I've heard of this stuff, but I've never actually tried it myself.
Yeah, okay, so the mushroom coffee itself, I don't know too much about it. This was actually something that Cassie was coming up with, and it's supposed to help with like your gut health, which if you have a strong, good gut health, ultimately, you know, that it's just healthier overall, but it also helps you to like lose weight and stay in shape. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of like it just cleans you out real well, so that way you don't got a lot of toxins flying around your body.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm not one who's like super in depth into this, but you know, it is a thing.
Okay. How do you like it so far? What do you think?
It's very earthy. The taste itself. You see, I'm a coffee drinker. The taste surprised the hell out of me.
What does it taste like? Coffee in the mud?
It's like I said, it's earthy, so earthy, a little bit chalky, but there's a very distinct, you know, there legitimately is like a distinct, like almost mushroomy taste to it. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, I know exactly. It's like, well, duh, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to like, it's kind of funny because if you were to take a mushroom and just start like licking it like a popsicle, it would taste like that.
Huh.
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is it caffeinating?
Yeah, it's caffeinated. I don't know what I think about it though. I got to be honest, because it's like I don't dislike the taste.
Yeah.
But it's such like it's a shock to me. So I'm not sure if I like the taste either, you know?
We got Arceus. Arceus coming in here. Good friend of the DGen Roundtable. Shout out to Arceus Kisiko. So it's not like cream of mushroom soup then, I presume.
No, it is not.
Okay. I imagine I might have had mushroom coffee. I don't entirely know. I would hope it doesn't taste like cream of mushroom soup. She's coming back saying because if that was caffeinated, then she might go for it. Caffeinated cream of mushroom soup. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen, here on the DGen Roundtable. Get you some caffeinated mushroom cream of mushroom soup coffee stuff. Amber comes back saying, "I'm a hardcore fan. Definitely earthy. It's a huge game changer in gut health." That's good to know. I don't know much about gut health, but hey, I will take your word for it. So shout out to all of our mushroom coffee drinkers. I kept hearing advertisements for it when I used to watch Lex Friedman back in the day, the mushroom coffee stuff, and I think they were on like Joe Rogan podcasts too. But Lion's Mane, that's what it was. It was the Lion's Mane.
Yeah, Lion's Mane is one of them. It's supposed to be for like focus or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never tried it. I have no idea. I can't pass judgment on it. But like knowing that it tastes earthy is a little bit of a disinterest factor, at least for me personally. So that's but it's not horrible. You were saying it's not bad. It's
no, it's not terrible.
Okay, well that's good. That's good, I suppose. Well, let's see. So that's what's new with you. That's what's new with me. We've got one more chat shout out coming in. We are joined by Tam Tam, who says, "Hello, my lovelies." Hello to you too, Tam Tam.
Hey, damn.
Yep. Shout out to the #1 pulse chain, Hexaco, and cryptocurrency space cheerleader in general. Good to see you, Tam. Welcome to the stream. Again, guys, we're covering the Ethereum white paper today. So that's going to be the meat and potatoes of the show. I'm going to give you guys a real quick and basic overview of the white paper. More or less what it does is it explains the Ethereum's architecture and specifically like focuses on why it's different than Bitcoin. So that's the
That
main
sounds like Vitalik.
that's the main gist of it. And Vitalik was the guy that authored the
Yeah.
Ethereum white paper.
Yeah,
It
he
came
was
out
originally a Bitcoin guy, and unfortunately, he basically got pushed out by the Bitcoin people because he dared to try and improve it to make it work kind of like Ethereum. Imagine Bitcoin and Ethereum like blended together. Holy cow!
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there was a lot of stuff that was happening in Bitcoin's early days, and you guys will see next week when we finally cover Roger Ver's hijacking Bitcoin book, which because Zenith will finally be joining us next week, so that's what we're going to be covering for next week's book club. So you guys have had plenty of time to read Roger Ver's hijacking Bitcoin. We were originally going to cover it, I want to say 3 weeks ago, and then we were unable to because it's not that we weren't unable to. I had read the book and I could host it, but I know that Zenith really, really, really wanted to join us and he was not available. So we've been pushing it off and covering white papers instead. So that's we're going to learn a lot about the history of Bitcoin, why Vitalik left, why other people split off, why they created Bitcoin Cash, why they kept doing a whole bunch of different things in Bitcoin's early days. So Vitalik created the Bitcoin white paper in 2014, and then the project actually launched in 2015. So that's a little bit of the history of the Ethereum white paper. So it's got, let me see, how many sections does it have? It has 11-ish sections. And so the first part is the introduction, and basically it talks about how like Bitcoin lets you send money, but you can't easily create like programmable rules like if Bob sends me money, then pay Alice later. Ethereum was basically designed to let anybody build anything using decentralized code and smart contracts and things of that nature. And then the second part of the Ethereum white paper is it goes over Bitcoin and its limitations. It talks about how Bitcoin's basically like a calculator, but Ethereum is a computer, right? So Bitcoin can handle simple transactions, but Ethereum can run apps, it can do games, it can finance, it can create voting, it can do a whole bunch of stuff. The third section is about scripting, where it talks about how people tried to build on top of Bitcoin, but it basically like it was super duper janky because building on Bitcoin is basically like trying to tape new gadgets onto an old phone. You got like an old rotary, and it's like, oh, I want to add a camera to my rotary phone, so I'm going to tape like a Nikon camera to my fucking rotary phone, and it's like, no, that doesn't work. So Ethereum just was like, hey, we're just gonna make a new thing, and it's gonna be better. So that's like Ethereum started from scratch to be able to do that, and Bitcoin is one of the things Richard likes to say a lot is Bitcoin spaghetti code. It can do one thing and that's it. It can send and receive, and everything else is just kind of like, good luck. But Ethereum runs protocols. Ethereum is a smart contract thingamajigger. It's like an if this then that. You can do a whole bunch of stuff. It's a difference between like mail and the internet. So that's essentially the what that part's about. And then it goes into section 4 where it talks specifically about Ethereum, and it states that Ethereum is essentially a global computer that anyone can program. It runs on thousands of machines, and once something is deployed, then it cannot be changed or stopped. Then it goes into the types of accounts that exist on Ethereum, and there's essentially two types of accounts. There's externally owned accounts, so EOAs, which is essentially like your wallet, and then there's contract accounts. So when you launch a smart contract, then it's an account that is controlled by code, and then whenever anyone like activates it, then it runs and it does like a process. It's like you set up a machine and you put it out there, and anyone can walk up and press the big red button or the green button on it, and then it does the stuff. So essentially you can have like regular users, and you can also have like robot users that exist forever. So that's essentially like the big difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin. Section 6 is on messages and transactions. Transactions are how users and contracts talk to each other, and they include like payments and instructions and datas and value and gas things. And we'll get into the details on that when we cover that section. Section 7 is about Ethereum state transaction function. or transition function, right? So Ethereum's basically like a game where everyone can move and like it changes the world. So everyone agrees on what the current game board looks like. So Ethereum changes constantly. It updates to the market, it updates to the needs, it updates to like new technological innovation. They're constantly coming out with improvements to Ethereum, something that Bitcoin is not doing. And there was a discussion I was having with my good friend Marco earlier today. Is that, one of the big concerns that I have with Bitcoin is that it doesn't keep up with the tech. It doesn't, like, at some point there's going to be people that invent new malicious ways to steal code or break things that happen or whatever the hell. Ethereum's constantly adapting. Bitcoin's just kind of like, the horse with the blinders on, charging straight and doing its thing. So
Bitcoin is pet rock.
Bitcoin is pet rock, and Ethereum is like, a machine that you're constantly taking parts off and putting new parts on and making it better the whole time.
Yeah,
So-
the kind of, if you were to compare it to, say, macro, right? Bitcoin is going to be digital gold, aka just sits there and it really doesn't do anything. It's just rock, right? Whereas Ethereum is more like oil. It's used to run things. It's used to build things. Like there's a very good use case for it.
And it's consumed in the process. So it's like, that's the,
Yes.
like Ethereum is created by staking, and Ethereum is destroyed by transactions and computations. So like that's the like Ethereum can either be inflationary because there's more people staking and validating than there are people like transacting and destroying, or it can be deflationary. It can go either which way. So there's a whole bunch of like, but that's a great analogy, Nate. Gold compared to oil. So I totally agree right there. The next section 8, talks about code execution. So it basically describes that like smart contracts are essentially like a world computer that every time you run a function, it charges you a cost. So the more complex the code is, the more it charges you for the transaction. So this kind of like prevents abuse. So imagine that you had a calculator that every time, well, actually this is how calculators work. It's legitimately how they work. You have to put batteries inside of your calculator, and eventually your calculator dies and you need new batteries. So every transaction that you do on that calculator costs you electricity, right? Batteries aren't for free. So every calculation you run, like if you bust every single battery down into like a little microtransaction, every single calculation you do on a calculator consumes electricity. So that you scale that process up, and that essentially describes like what Ethereum does when you pay for transactions or swaps or sends or stakes or unstakes or minting an NFT or things of that nature. Excuse me. Every single one of those has a transactional cost based on the amount of computational power that it takes. So that's essentially how that works. Then they compare it to like the blockchain and the mining, and so essentially like similar to Bitcoin, Ethereum uses blocks and it used to use mining. But now they have switched into validating, and so instead of mining, you essentially so Bitcoin, you consume a bunch of electricity and you guess random numbers until you get it right, and then you're rewarded with Bitcoin. In Ethereum, what you do is you take Ethereum that you already have and you say, hey, I promise that I'm only going to do good validations, and to validate my promise that I'm only going to validate correct transactions and hashes and computations and things, I'm going to take a whole bunch of money and I'm going to put it up here, and if I make a bad transaction, then you guys take all my money. So it's like that's the proof of stake model, and that's what Ethereum does. So Ethereum pays validators to run the network, and blocks are kind of like the pages in the notebook, um, or like the individual links on a chain. So like this is a similar blockchain to Bitcoin and stuff. So that's the blockchain and mining part. And then section 10 covers like a whole bunch of the applications that it supports. So like just to name a few, you've got like token systems. So there's different types of tokens that exist, but the most common one is ERC20s. Those are like basically every single token that you see everywhere. So that's all the cool stuff. They've got financial derivatives, they've got identity systems, they've got DAOs, decentralized autonomous organization. They can make gambling platforms. They can do fucking anything. So Ethereum can run anything you want, from your own coin to like creating a whole full-blown decentralized company. It's basically like an app store, but on the blockchain. So Nate, I see that you have rejoined. I'm gonna add you back up here.
Yeah, I was trying to mess around, trying to figure out my my camera. And yeah, I
Okay,
think
dokie.
StreamYards is just kind of messing up right now because it doesn't even give me an option for a camera.
Oh, that's interesting. That's
Yeah,
tricky.
so
I've been there before. Yeah, StreamYard's buggy, but like we can
it is
still
what it
hear you
is.
and stuff. Just
Yeah,
let
that's
me
all
know
it's needed.
when you've got a thought. And then section 11, which is the last like substantive section, talks about the Ethereum development roadmap. So like they basically like got 4 stages that they planned on. There's Frontier, Homestead, Metropolis, and Serenity. So Frontier is like the basic, like we're starting. Homestead is more like stable. Metropolis, they start making Ethereum more user friendly, and then Serenity is when they start moving into like proof of stake and stuff. And so Ethereum essentially planned to grow slowly. Early the versions were like raw and unedited, and then later like versions added speed, better usability, eco-friendly features, things of that nature. So they talk about like the Ethereum development roadmap. And again, guys, this was written in 2014, so um, take that for what it's worth. And then the last part is like the conclusion. So Ethereum's not just a coin; it's essentially an entire digital economy, programmable, unstoppable, global, decentralized. It's super duper cool. So that's the super quick and easy breakdown of the Ethereum white paper. Nate, do you have any thoughts on anything before I go ahead and open up the actual white paper and we
No,
start
let's
reading?
jump into this.
All right, sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen share by clicking on the present button.
Well, I guess there is one thing,
Share
and while
this.
you're bringing that up, so
Sure.
Ethereum essentially, if when you're thinking about like how important Bitcoin is, being the digital gold and all that, it becomes the digital store of value, right? And that's the importance that Bitcoin has. But Ethereum is absolutely essential for building. So when we talk about Ethereum, like, oh, Ethereum's expensive, we would much rather be on like Pulse Chain or something like that, right? Or Solana. You got to remember, where this all started. And ultimately, Vitalek Buterin, who created Ethereum, who envisioned it, who was the visionary who created it. Ultimately, he is something of like a 4,000 IQ alien, as our friend Sami loves to say. And he truly is an incredibly ingenious kid. So, because I believe he created Ethereum. Oh no, he was a publisher in a it was a paper at 17, and then he created Ethereum, I think at like 21 years old, which was, I mean, that's insane, dude. To create Ethereum, freaking this is literally the building blocks of all of crypto.
Mm-hmm. Ethereum is like, it was groundbreaking technology when it came out.
Yeah.
Now it's just kind of like, yes, Ethereum, cool stuff. But we're gonna learn a little bit about the history. And oh goodness, get out of here, Mr. Research, and see what we got. So, before we get into it, God bless America. Wow, that just kind of pops up, doesn't it? Go away. Okay. Wow. What do I even do that makes that happen? I think if I put my mouse up above that line is when that shows up. All right, so the Ethereum white paper. All right, so this introductory paper was originally published in 2014 by Vitalik Buterin, the founder of Ethereum, before its project launch in 2015. It's worth noting that Ethereum, like many community-driven open source software projects, has evolved since its initial inception.
Yeah.
While several years old, we maintain this paper because it continues to serve as a useful reference and an accurate representation of Ethereum and its visit. To learn about this developments of Ethereum, how changes to the protocol are made, we recommend this guide. I'm going to actually click on that because I'm going to presume. Oh, shit. Well,
did you
we're
break it again?
Nope. That's a whole different page. That's eth.com /learn. We are on eth.com or eth.org, excuse me, ethereum.org /white paper. I'll go ahead and actually I'm gonna drop that link in the chats. So if you guys want to go check out the Ethereum white paper yourself, then here it is. It's ethereum.org /English /white paper. So there you guys go. You guys can check it out over there. That's where you can find this stuff. By the way, we've also been joined by our good friend Paul Sachs. Good to see you boys. Y'all already cover the fourth turning. Good sir, the fourth turning is what happens after you flip that pancake 3 times. So that's what the fourth turning is. So in case anyone is curious, you can go ahead and Google it, and Google will probably say the same thing that I did if Google knows what's good for it. Anyways, so that's what we got. All right, let's see. Back to the Ethereum. So All right. So research academic like a historical canon version of the white paper. Oh, okay. So this is the historical or canonical version of the white paper. Oh, that's interesting. So we're reading the adjusted one, and then this is like the OG one. So that's pretty cool. I'm gonna open that up in a separate folder and see how long. Oh, geez Louise, that's 36 pages. That's
Oh my
actually
god.
that looks a lot. That's a lot easier looking to read than this one because it's a PDF. But I'm not terribly worried about that. So we're not worried about format.
Developments though, and like changes to the protocol. So I mean, if 36 pages, that does tell you just how many changes have gone through and how much more it's improved since its conception.
Yeah. And this thing doesn't tell me. Oh goodness, that's gonna piss me off. Get out of here. All right. If that happens a whole lot, I might find a way to make that go away. But anyways, so we're gonna go ahead and jump right on into it. Any comments before we go ahead and read this first paragraph? All right, sweet. So a next generation smart contract and decentralized application platform. Satoshi Nakamoto's development of Bitcoin in 2009 has often been hailed as a radical development in money and currency, being the first example of a digital asset which simultaneously has no backing or intrinsic value and no centralized issuer controller. However, another arguably more important part of Bitcoin experiment is the underlying blockchain technology as a tool of distributed consensus, and attention is rapidly starting to shift to this other aspect of Bitcoin. Commonly cited alternative application of blockchain technology include using on-blockchain digital assets to represent custom currencies and financial instruments, colored coins. The ownership of the underlying physical device, smart property, non-fungible assets such as domain names, Namecoin, as well as more complex applications involving having digital assets being directly controlled by a piece of code implementing arbitrary rules, smart contracts, or even blockchain-based decentralized autonomous organization, so DAOs. One of the cool things I want to say before we go on is this is what I share with you guys every time that the streams are coming to an end, and I'm telling you like, hey, this is where you can find me. This is where all my info is will.pls.fyi. That is a decentralized a decentralized domain name. So like my will.pls.fyi link that I'm throwing into the chats right now, this thing right here, I'll go ahead and bring it up. That is a name coin. So that is a space that exists on the blockchain that you can find my social media, right? So I can go in there and I can use my credentials, my wallet to log in to my domain name, and then I can put things on there. Right now, it's just got a picture of me. It's got a couple links, like one's to like my Linktree thing, one is to like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of those things. So like this stuff, it's pretty damn cool. So yeah, and then smart contracts is like we were describing earlier, and then DAOs are really cool as well. So I just wanted to say that like this is something that like you can use. You can't do this on Bitcoin. There are no like .btc things. If you want to go and get like a Bitcoin domain name that exists on the Bitcoin network, good fucking luck. I'm not sure if I'm legitimately talking out of my ass right now, but I'm pretty sure that it doesn't happen. I'm pretty sure that it doesn't exist. But there's tons of people that have like, my name is blah 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 and my website is .eth. So that is like you can send that wallet something and that is that person's thing. Whoever decides to pay for that name using the smart contract is the one that gets it. So there you guys go. So
basically, if you were to think about it, it's literally kind of like an NFT, right? Non-fungible token. Well, instead of the token part, it's literally just your link tree. So that's exactly what it is. It's a non-fungible link tree.
It's a non-fungible link tree, and like you can put whatever the fuck you want in it. It also because it is blockchain, it is directly associated with an address. So I have control of that address of that wallet, and so like if like people fucking send shit coins or whatever to that wallet, then it goes into my possession or something. So you can use it as like an alternative to Cash App. You can use it as a doxed. So like you've identified yourself publicly on the internet as like, hey, this is the thing, and it's like blah 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 blah. So
yeah.
there's a lot of cool things that you can do with it. So anyways, these are just some of the stuffs that like the commonly cited alternative application of blockchain technology is like this is what you can do with on-chain digital stuff. You can't do this stuff on Bitcoin. You can do it on Ethereum. So it's important. Bitcoin is a cool thing. It's worth money and you can send it and that's it. And then Ethereum is like, hey, I can write code that auto executes when I click this button that says compute. So that's pretty cool. So
Easier the better.
Ethereum, what's that?
Easier the better.
Yep, exactly. So what Ethereum intends to provide is a blockchain with a built-in, fully fledged, Turing-complete programming language that can be used to create contracts that can then be used to encode arbitrary state transition functions, allowing users to create any of the systems described above, as well as many others that we have not yet imagined, simply by writing up the logic in a few lines of code. Introduction to Bitcoin and existing concepts. Any thoughts on this, Nate, before we go on?
No. Keep her going. Keep her going.
All right, sweet. History. The concept of decentralized digital currency, as well as alternative applications like property registries, have been around for decades. Anonymous eCash protocols of the 1980s and the 1990s, mostly reliant on cryptographic primitive known as Shawmane binding, provided a currency with a high degree of privacy, but the protocols largely failed to gain traction because of their reliance on centralized intermediary. In 1998, Wei Dai's B-Money became the first proposal to introduce the idea of creating money through solving computational puzzles as well as decentralized consensus. The proposal was scant on details as to how decentralized consensus could actually be implemented. In 2005, Hal Finney introduced a concept of reusable proofs of work, a system which uses ideas from B-Money together with Adam Back's computationally difficult Hashcash puzzles to create a concept for cryptocurrency, but once again fell short of the ideal by relying on trusted computing as a backend. In 2009, a decentralized currency was for the first time implemented in practice by Satoshi Nakamoto, combining established primitives for managing ownership through public key cryptography with a consensus algorithm for keeping track of who owns coins known as proof of work. So again, guys, there's a little bit of history here. I'm surprised they didn't mention Len Sassaman. Len Sassaman was a big player back then too. So Hal Finney, Len Sassaman, Adam Back, those are all like big old Bitcoiners.
Big bold.
The mechanism behind proof of work was a breakthrough in the space because it simultaneously solved two problems. First, it provided a simple and moderately effective consensus algorithm, allowing nodes in the network to collectively agree on a set of canonical updates to the state of the Bitcoin ledger. Second, it provided a mechanism for allowing free entry into the consensus process, solving the political problem of deciding who gets to influence the consensus, while simultaneously preventing Sybil attacks. It does this by substituting a formal barrier to participation, such as the requirement to be registered as a unique entity on a particular list, with an economic barrier. The weight of a single node in the consensus voting process is directly proportional to the computing power that the node brings. Since then, an alternative approach has been proposed called proof of stake, calculating the weight of a node as being proportional to its currency holdings and not computational resources. The discussion of the relative merits of the two approaches is beyond the scope of this paper, but it should be noted that both approaches can be used to serve as the backbone of a cryptocurrency. Something worth noting before we head on, when they say a single node, this means this is the technical term for what we colloquially call miners. So miners in Bitcoin or validators in Ethereum. So these are the nodes are the people that say hey, this is what the blockchain is. So there you go. So there is that. So a little bit, oh, good golly, a little bit tech heavy. But that's a little bit of the history of Bitcoin. So let's see. Next up, we got Bitcoin as a state transition system. So this is basically, the long and short of this diagram here is what Bitcoin does is it says, hey, everybody owns money. Then there's a transaction. And now this is the new updated state of all of the wallets ever. So anytime a new Bitcoin block is added to the blockchain, anytime people do a transaction, then it's we're rewriting the entire not history, but we're rewriting the new state of the entire system. So whenever a block is added to the blockchain, it's like, hey, this is where all of the Bitcoin are, just so you guys know. This is the updates from these transactions. So if I send $1 to Nate, or 1 Bitcoin rather, if I send 1 Bitcoin to Nate, then when the new block is added, it says Will's wallet -1, Nate's wallet +1, and ta-da, the math equals everything. So Bitcoin basically describes state transition systems. So that's the TLDR of what this means to the folks at home who have never seen this sort of stuff before. So it describes the transactions and the like here we've got this address has nothing, this address has 2. Oh goodness. Oh wait, no, you guys can't see that. All right, I clicked on that and it brought up the oh golly. I clicked on this thing and it brought up the image in another tab. But anyways, you guys can see here all these unique individual addresses have different transactions. So we've got this guy, we got this guy. They're doing these things. They sign the stuff, and now this is the new state of the network. So there you go. From a technical standpoint, the ledger of a cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin can be thought of as a state transition system, where there is a state consisting of the ownership status of all existing Bitcoins and a state transition function that takes a state and a transaction and outputs a new state, which is the result. In a standard banking system, for example, the state is a balance sheet. A transaction is a request to move X dollars from A to B. And the state transitions function reduces the value in A's account by X and increases the value in B's account by X. If A's account has less than X in the first place, the state transition function returns an error. Hence, one can normally define this fucking piece of code right here. Oh,
the code.
Please. All right. Yeah, we're gonna skip past the code. But anyways, it works out. That's what you guys got to know. So there you go. In the state in Bitcoin is the collection of all coins, technically unspent transaction outputs, or UTXO, that have been minted and not yet spent, with each UTXO having a denomination and an owner. Defined by, okay, I'm not reading that. A transaction contains one or more inputs, with each input containing a reference to an existing UTXO and a cryptographic signature produced by the private key associated with the owner's address, and one or more outputs, with each output containing the new UTXO to be added to the state. So it's going to get real technical here, so we're just going to skip that part. And then he's going to basically explain the stuff here. We're going to skip to the analogy right here. So suppose Alice wants to send 11 Bitcoin to Bob. First, I'm going to just 11. First, Alice will look for a set of reliable UTXO that she owns totals up to at least 11 Bitcoin. Realistically, Alex will not be able to get exactly that. Say that the smallest she can get is 6 plus 4 plus 2 equals 12. She then creates a transaction. Oh man, this is pretty complicated. We're going to skip this part because it's unnecessary. We're going to talk about mining now. But before we talk about mining, do you have any thoughts, Nate?
Yeah, no, basically when you're reading through that, you can really see just how ingenious freaking Vitalek is, because that's yeah. He's definitely a coder for sure. And so when you're sitting here, all the time, that number, nuance, that number, previous hash, that number, it's like, oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah, he was a smart cookie when he wrote this. Oh, we have to at some point. I need to change the title. Ethereum white paper was written by Vitalek Buterin, so we know who wrote that. So I need to actually, I don't think I can change it while we're streaming live, but I'll worry about that later. No sweat. But yeah, dude, I agree. Vitalek was definitely he was a smart cookie.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts?
No, keep going.
All right, here we go. So we're next going to talk about mining. So this is the old status of how Ethereum was in the beginning. It was a mining state. Now it is a validating state. So I don't know if they have put it into here, but we're going to figure it out. So mining. If we had access to a trustworthy centralized service, this system would be trivial to implement. It could simply be coded exactly as described using a centralized server's hard drive to keep track of the state. However, with Bitcoin, we're trying to build a decentralized currency system. So we need to combine the state transaction system with a consensus system in order to ensure that everyone agrees on the order of transactions. Bitcoin's decentralized consensus process requires nodes in the network to continuously attempt to produce packages of transactions called blocks. The network is intended to produce roughly one block every 10 minutes, with each block containing a timestamp, a nonce, a reference to the previous block, and a list of all the transactions that have taken place since the previous block. Over time, this creates a persistent, ever-growing blockchain that constantly updates to represent the latest state of the Bitcoin ledger.
Yep.
The
So
algorithm
basically
for check
Bitcoin right there.
Exactly. Yeah. So he is describing the mining
Mhm.
in Bitcoin. And for those of you guys that aren't sure what he means by like the centralized and the decentralized, essentially like if you have a whole bunch of people that are trying to add truth to one thing, then they have to prove that the thing that they're adding is truth, and that's where the mining comes into play. In a more centralized service, you don't have to rely on truth because there's one person that says this is truth and everything else is lies. So when I go like take Bank of America for instance. Bank of America is centralized. They say this money is truth. So if you have a bank account and you send your money to someone else, then it's Bank of America's job to make sure that your account says minus $100 and someone else's bank account, maybe a different bank, maybe someone else says plus $100. The process relies on Bank of America. So, like, what happens if somebody drops a bomb on Bank of America? What happens if Bank of America goes bankrupt? What happens this, that, or the other thing? If all that if any of that stuff happens to this one centralized location, then everything's kaput, everything's nil. There's nobody that's running all of these transactions. With Bitcoin, what happens is there's a whole bunch of people that have to prove that what's going on is true, and they prove what's going on is true, and then they add their little block to the blockchain, and there's one block added every 10 minutes. So everyone's competing to be to have the true block um added to the chain. And when you're the one that is the winner, right? And it's so like not only do you have to do a whole like prove that a whole bunch of transactions are correct, but you also have to guess a random number, right? And this random number is like 64 characters long, and it's also like instead of 0 through 9, which is 10, it's 0 through F, which is 16. So like it gets crazier and crazier and crazier to guess the super magical number. And you basically just have to prove a whole bunch of transactions are right, guess a lucky number. Oh, you didn't do it? All right, try again. And so the computers do this like at infinite crazy speed. And that's why Bitcoin consumes so much electricity, is because you have a whole bunch of computers just guessing random numbers and also proving that transactions are real. And so, like with Ethereum, they're a little bit different. But that's essentially the difference between like the centralized like what he's talking about here, the centralized server's hard drive to keep track of the state, versus like the Bitcoin one where it's a decentralized currency system. So because anybody can add to it by doing work, right, and proving honesty, then anybody can update the system. And if somebody puts in a bad one, then it's super easy for people to be like, oh, your transaction things are wrong. Like if somebody tries to be like, oh, I have 1,000 Bitcoin that I got out of nowhere, then like literally everyone can see it and they're like, ah, you're full of shit. You're not allowed to put that block onto the blockchain. Haha. So that's essentially how the centralized and the decentralized are different from each other. So I just figured that merits a little bit of explaining for the folks at home who are not used to this sort of thing. So then there's an algorithm for checking if the block is valid. We're not going to go through the algorithm because this is basically the piddly little details of how this stuff works. But just basically, here's the nerd math on proving that it's all right and stuff. I don't really know how to explain this in peanut brain diamond hands words because I myself don't understand it. So there you go. But essentially, each transaction in the block must provide a valid state transaction from what was the canonical state before the transaction was executed to some new state. Note that the state is not encoded in the block in any way. It is purely an abstraction to be remembered by the validating node and can only be securely computed for any block by starting from the genesis state and sequentially applying every transaction in every block. Additionally, note that the order in which the miner includes transactions to the block matters. If there are two transactions, A and B, in a block that's such that B spends this created by A, then the block will be valid if A comes in before B, but not otherwise. So, like the timing is important as well. So that's why the blocks are time stamped. One validity condition present in the above list is not found in other systems is the requirement for proof of work. The precise condition is that the double SHA-256 hash of every block treated as a 256-bit number. Oh, 256, excuse me, not 64. So there you go. 256-bit number must be less. Good golly. Must be less than a dynamically adjusted target, which, as of the time of this writing, is approximately 2 to the 187th power. For shits and giggles, we're going to do that. What is 2 to the 187th power? I have to. Oh, God. How do it? That's obnoxious. I don't like that function. So I'm copying and pasting 2 to the 100. Oh, nope. I need to do 2 with a little thingamajigger. All right. So, oh, wowee. All right. So it's the number. So you know how like a billion is 1 followed by 9 zeros? This one is 1 followed by let's see, 1, 2, or 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63. So there's 63 zeros after after the 1. So that's like the
That is a
number that
lot.
you gotta guess. That's a lot of fucking numbers. So basically, good luck. And also, I'm pretty sure that oh, what is the meaning of 167 in the Quran? Huh? I guess there's something about the Quran. That's interesting. I just Googled the number and it gave me a Quran result in addition to the actual math. But anyways,
What?
this is a really fucking big number. So the purpose of this is to make the block creation computationally hard, thereby preventing Sybil attackers from remaking the entire blockchain in their favor. Because SHA-256 is designed to be a completely unpredictable pseudo-random function, the only way to create a valid block is simply trial and error, repeatedly incrementing the nonce and seeing if the new hash matches. So that's why we said it's a big fucking guessing game, because it's like it's a random number generator. And so you got to guess the random number, and that's how you create a block. So, bam. The current target of approximately 2 to the 187th power, the network must take an average of 2 to the 69th power tries before a valid block is found. In general, the target is recalibrated by the network every 216 blocks so that, on average, a new block is produced by some node in the network every 10 minutes. In order to compensate miners for this computational work, the miner of every block is entitled to include a transaction, giving themselves 25 Bitcoin out of nowhere. Additionally, if any transaction has a higher total denomination in its inputs than its outputs, the difference also goes to the miner as the transaction fee. Incidentally, this is also the only mechanism by which Bitcoin are issued. The Genesis state contained no coins at all. So one thing to note is that this number has changed. This number changes every 4 years. In the first 4 years of Bitcoin's lifespan, it was 50 Bitcoin. And then the halvening happened 4 years later, turned into 25 Bitcoin. And then the halvening happened again. Then it was 12 and a half. Then the halvening happened again. Then it was 6.25. And I think that right now we're at 3 1/8 Bitcoin per block. So the halvenings keep happening every 4 years. And so, oh, excuse me, at
That's
the
an
time
insane
when,
difference.
oh yeah. So basically, like they include 25 Bitcoin in their wallets when they successfully mine the block. So that's how mining creates Bitcoin. That is where Bitcoin comes from. Bitcoin doesn't exist. A miner successfully, guesses the random number and adds a block to the blockchain, and he is given 25 Bitcoins. So, or at least back then it was 25 Bitcoins. Now, it's like it's 3 1/8 Bitcoin. So anyways, so also there's the transaction fees, which is something of a
Slight
oh shoot,
problem.
Roger. Yeah, it's something of a slight problem. So this is something Roger Ver covers very well in the Hijacking Bitcoin book, because basically what happens, like the reason that Bitcoin prices get so high is because people just outbid each other. So Bitcoin can only handle 3,000 to 2 to 3,000 transactions every 10 minutes, right? So that's about 7 transactions every second.
That's
So
slow as all hell, by the way. To
slow as all
compare that
hell.
to to compare that
Ridiculous.
to like Visa, which I believe
Yeah.
is like, isn't it like 25 million per second or something? It's
I,
just
I want to
wild.
say it's somewhere, it's in the, it's orders of magnitude greater. So it's like at a certain point, like the numbers don't matter. The number of zeros after the number matters more, and that's how much better MasterCard and Visa are at transactions than Bitcoin. And it's like just like Bitcoin works, it's functional, but the problem that happens is during the bull market when more and more people find out about it and more transactions are happening and more people are using the Bitcoin network to do whatever the hell they want. Like I know that ordinals were created recently that's like just a really shitty version of NFTs that exist on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Little too late.
But those cost a lot of gas and it's a high transaction fee. So what does that mean for normal people that are just trying to send one Bitcoin from themselves to another? Like I want to say last cycle, some of the Bitcoin fees, like you were looking at spending $1,000 worth of Bitcoin in order to get a transaction through because there were so many people trying to get transactions. The miners, because the block space is so fucking small, the miners were like they were choosing the transactions with the highest like fees that were given. So you can adjust like how much you want to put in as a fee, like for the miner to process your transaction. You can pay a higher fee or you can pay a lower fee, right? um and if you choose to pay a higher fee, then your transaction, it jumps up to wherever that spot is in the line. It's kind of like if you guys ever go to a bar and they've got those jukeboxes and you can pay to play your song, or you can pay more to skip to the front of the line and pay and like play your song before everyone else. um if there's too many people that want to play music, the price of that song play just keeps going up and up and up. So this is what happens with Bitcoin during the bull market when everyone finds out about it and everyone wants to use Bitcoin as a way to transact or to create ordinals or do whatever the hell. All these things become super big issues. So anyways, that's neither here nor there and has to do with this. But I wanted to mention that like 25 Bitcoin is obsolete information. Now it is 3 1/8 of a Bitcoin per transaction. But this is originally like this again. This is historical information. It's good for people to know. It's no longer valid now. Any thoughts, Nate? Before I continue.
No. I think we hit that pretty good.
Alrighty, thanks, sir. All right, so let's see, where were we? The Genesis state contained no coins at all. Yeah, so the first transaction in Bitcoin was Satoshi sending Hal Finney some Bitty coins, and in that process, the first Bitcoin block was mined, and now congratulations, Bitcoins exist. And the next time someone sent coins, there was more Bitcoins, and et cetera, et cetera. Fiddlesticks, get out of here. In order to better understand the purpose of mining, let us examine what happens in the event of a malicious attacker. Since Bitcoin's underlying cryptography is known to be secure, the attacker will target the one part of the Bitcoin system that is not protected by cryptography directly, the order of transactions. The attacker's strategy is simple. Send 100 Bitcoin to a merchant in exchange for some product, preferably a rapid delivery digital good. Wait for the delivery of the product. Produce another transaction sending the same 100 Bitcoin to himself. Try to convince the network that his transaction to himself was the one that came first. Once step 1 has taken place, after a few minutes, some miner will include that transaction in a block, say block number 207 or 2.2,700,000. After about 1 hour, 5 more blocks will have been added to the chain after the block, with each of these blocks indirectly pointing to the transaction and thus confirming it. At this point, the merchant will accept the payment as finalized and deliver the product. Since we are assuming this is a digital project, the delivery is instant. Now the attacker creates another transaction, sending the 100 Bitcoin to himself. If the attacker simply releases it into the wild, the transaction will not be processed. Miners will continue to apply this fucking nerd language. They'll continue to run this thing, which is no longer in the state. So instead, the attacker creates a fork of the blockchain, starting by mining another version of block that number, 2.7 million, pointing to the same block 269999 as a parent, but with the new transaction in place of the old one. Because the block data is different, this requires redoing the proof of work. Furthermore, the attacker's new version of the block has a different hash. So the original block's 2.71 and all the way up to 2.75 do not point to it. Thus, the original chain and the attacker's new chain are completely separate. The rule is that in a fork, the longest blockchain is taken to be the truth, and so legitimate miners will need to work on the 27 or 2.75 chain, while the attacker alone is working on the 2.70 chain. In order for the attacker to make his blockchain the longest, he would need to have more computational power than the rest of the network combined in order to catch up, hence 51% attack. So he has to have a shit ton of computing. Merkle trees. So this basically describes how they condense data. Let's see. Do I have to explain this? This is nerd stuff, so I'll go ahead and read this. An important scalability feature of Bitcoin is that the block is stored in multi-level data structure. The hash of a block is actually only the hash of the block header, a roughly 200 byte piece of data that contains the timestamp, nonce, previous block hash, and the root hash of the data structure called the Merkle tree, storing all transactions in the block. A Merkle tree is a type of binary tree, composed of a set of nodes with a large number of leaf nodes at the bottom of the tree containing the underlying data, a set of intermediate nodes where each node is the hash of its two children, and finally a single root node, also forming the hash of its two children, representing the top of the tree. The purpose of the Merkle tree is to allow the data in a block to be delivered piecemeal. A node can download only the header of a block from one source, the small part of the tree relevant to them from another source, and still be assured that all of the data is correct. The reason why this works is that hashes propagate upward. If a malicious attacker attempts to swap in a fake transaction to the bottom of a Merkle tree, this change will cause a change in the node above, and then a change in the node above that, finally changing the root of the tree and therefore the hash of the block, causing the protocol to register it as a completely different block, almost certainly with an invalid proof of work. The Merkle tree protocol is arguably essential to long-term sustainability. A full node in the Bitcoin network, one that stores and processes the entirety of every block, takes up about 15 gigabytes of disk space in the Bitcoin network as of April 2014, and is growing by over 1 gigabyte per month. Currently, this is viable for some desktop computers and not phones, and later on in the future, only businesses and hobbyists will be able to participate. Hey, who would have thought only businesses and hobbyists will be able to participate? Well said. A protocol known as a Simplified Payment Verification, SPV, allows for another class of nodes to exist called light nodes, which only download the block headers, verify the proof of work on the block headers, and then download only the branches associated with transactions that are relevant to them. This allows light nodes to determine with a strong guarantee of security that what the status of any Bitcoin transaction and their current balance is, while downloading only a small portion of the entire blockchain. So this is actually very important. The SPVs, simplified payment verifications, that's a very big part of the book that we will cover on next week's book club. Any thoughts on Merkle trees or mining, Mr. Nate, before I move on?
Merkle trees are complicated as all hell.
Yes, that is correct. They're complicated, and it's basically like, hey, trust the nerds, the math works. You
Yeah.
can verify it if you learn how. So there you go. All right, alternative blockchain applications. The idea of taking the underlying blockchain idea and applying it to other concepts also has a long history. In 2005, Nick Szabo came out with the concept of secure property titles with owner authority, a document describing how new advances in replicated database technology will allow for blockchain-based system for storing a registry of who owns what land, creating an elaborate framework,
That's awesome.
including concepts such as homesteading, adverse possession, and Georgian land tax. However, there was unfortunately no effective replicated database system available at the time, and so the protocol was never implemented in practice. After 2009, however, once Bitcoin's decentralized consensus was developed, a number of alternative applications rapidly began to emerge. Namecoin. Created in 2010, Namecoin is best described as a decentralized name registration database. In decentralized protocols like Tor, Bitcoin, and Bitmessage, there needs to be some way of identifying accounts so that other people can interact with them. But in all existing solutions, the only kind of identifier available is a pseudo-random hash like this.
Like that.
Ideally, one would be able to have an account with a name like George. However, the problem is that if only one person can create an account named George, then someone else can use the same process to register George for themselves as well and impersonate them. The only solution is a first to file paradigm, where the first register succeeds and the second fails, a problem perfectly suited for the Bitcoin consensus protocol. Namecoin is the oldest and most successful implementation of a name registration system using such an idea. Colored coins. The purpose of colored coins is to serve as a protocol to allow people to create their own digital currencies, or in the important trivial case of a currency with one unit, digital tokens on the Bitcoin blockchain. In the Colored Coins protocol, one issues a new currency by publicly assigning a color to a specific Bitcoin UTXO, and the protocol recursively defines the color of other UTXO to be the same as the color of the inputs that the transaction system or that the transaction creating them spent. Some special rules here apply in the case of mixed color inputs. This allows users to maintain wallets containing the UTXO of a specific color and send them around much like regular Bitcoins, backtracking through the blockchain to determine the color of any UTXO they receive.
Okay,
Don't
so
know what
wait,
that
that sounds a lot like an RPC, basically. An
I don't know
RPC.
what an RPC is.
So like say, when you have, you know, a MetaMask, you've got the network of Ethereum, and then you got to change it over to like say AVAX or, you know,
Oh,
Avalanche if you want to use coins from there. That's kind of what that sounds like right there. So specifically like an ERC20, right? That right there would be a colored coin.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like to
suppose.
me. And the one before that too, it sounded a lot like just NFTs in general, you know.
Okay. I will take your word for it because I don't understand. So sounds good, man. RPC, which I even forgot what that stands for. But we will go ahead and move on into metacoins. The idea behind a metacoin is to have a protocol that lives on top of Bitcoin, using Bitcoin transactions to store metacoin transactions, but having a different state transaction function apply. Because the metacoin protocol cannot prevent invalid metacoin transactions from appearing in the Bitcoin blockchain, a rule is added that if blah-de-da returns an error, the protocol defaults to blah-de-da-de-da. This provides an easy mechanism for creating an arbitrary cryptocurrency protocol, potentially with advanced features that cannot be implemented inside of Bitcoin itself, but with very low development costs since the complexities of mining and network are already handled by the Bitcoin protocol. Metacoins have been used to implement some classes of financial contracts, name registration, and decentralized exchange. Thus, in general, there's two approaches toward building a consensus protocol: building an independent network and building a protocol on top of Bitcoin. The former approach, while reasonably successful in the case of applications such like Namecoin, is difficult to implement. Each individual implementation needs to bootstrap an independent blockchain as well as building and testing all of the necessary state transition and networking code. Additionally, we predict that the set of applications for decentralized consensus technology will follow a power law distribution where the vast majority of applications would be too small to warrant their own blockchain. And we note that there exist large classes of decentralized applications, particularly decentralized autonomous organizations that need to interact with each other. The Bitcoin-based approach, on the other hand, has the flaw that it does not inherit the simplified payment verification Bitcoin or features of Bitcoin. SPV works for Bitcoin because it can use the blockchain depth as a proxy for validity. At some point, once the ancestors of a transaction go far enough back, it is safe to say that they were legitimately part of the state. Blockchain-based meta protocols, on the other hand, cannot force the blockchain not to include transactions that are not valid within the context of their own protocols. Hence, a fully secure SPV meta protocol implementation would need to backward scan all the way to the beginning of Bitcoin blockchain to determine whether or not certain transactions are valid. Certainly, all light implementations of Bitcoin-based meta protocols rely on a trusted server to provide the data, arguably a highly suboptimal result, especially when one primary purpose of a cryptocurrency is to eliminate the need for trust.
Yes. AKA smart contracts.
Yep. And that brings us into scripting. So even without any extensions, the Bitcoin protocol actually does facilitate a weak version of a concept of smart contracts. UTXO in Bitcoin can be owned not just by a public key, but also by a more complicated script expressed in a simple stack-based programming language. In this paradigm, the transaction spending of the UTXO must provide data that satisfy the script. Indeed, even the basic public key ownership mechanism is implemented via a script. The script takes an elliptic curve signature as input, verifies it against the transaction and the address that owns the UTXO, and returns 1 if the verification is successful and 0 if otherwise. Other, more complicated scripts exist for various additional use cases. For example, one can construct a script that requires signatures from 2 of a given 3 private keys to validate, so multi-signature. A setup useful for corporate accounts, secure savings accounts, and some merchant escrow situations. Scripts can also be used to pay bounties for solutions to computational problems, And one can even construct a script that says something like, this Bitcoin UTXO is yours if you can provide an SPV proof that you sent a Dogecoin transaction of this denomination to me, essentially allowing you to decentralized cross cryptocurrency exchange. Ooh, that's interesting.
Mhm.
However, the scripting language as implemented in Bitcoin has several important limitations. Lack of Turing completeness. That is to say that while there is a large subset of computation that the Bitcoin scripting language supports, it does not nearly support everything. The main category is missing is loops. This is done to avoid infinite loops during transaction verification. Theoretically, this is a surmountable obstacle for script programmers, since any loop can be simulated by simply repeating the underlying code many times with an if statement. But it does lead to scripts that are very space inefficient. For example, implementing an alternative elliptic curve signature algorithm would likely require 256 repeated multiplication rounds of an individual included by the code. Value blindness. There is no way for a UTXO script to provide fine-grained control over the amount that can be withdrawn. For example, one powerful use case of an Oracle contract would be a hedging contract, where A and B put in $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and after 30 days, the script sends 1,000 worth of Bitcoin to A and the rest to B. This would require an oracle to determine the value of one Bitcoin in US dollar. But even then, it is a massive improvement in terms of trust and infrastructure requirement over the fully centralized solutions that are available now. However, because UTXO are all or nothing, the only way to achieve this is through the very inefficient hack of having many UTXO of varying denominations, and having the oracle pick which UTXO to send to A and which to B. Lack of state. UTXO can either be spent or unspent. There is no opportunity for multi-stage contracts or scripts which can keep an other internal state beyond that. This makes it hard to make multi-stage options contracts, decentralized exchanges offers, or two-stage cryptographic commitment protocols necessary for secure computational bounties. It also means that UTXO can only be used to build simple, one-off contracts and not more complex, stateful contracts, such as decentralized organizations, and makes meta protocols difficult to implement. Binary state combined with value blindness also mean that other important applications withdrawal limits is impossible.
So this
Blockchain
is
blindness.
one of the things I'm
Go
kind of
ahead.
noticing here is all of this. It sounds like stuff we already understand, like we know because we use it every day. But the wording that he's using in this white paper is completely different. So the wording is like throwing me off.
Yeah. So essentially, this is the part 3 of the Ethereum white paper, where it talks about like how people tried building on top of Bitcoin, but it was like taping new gadgets onto an old phone.
Yeah,
It's like the camera
not good
thing.
enough.
Yeah, so that's the part of the thing that we're in, and this is describing like all of these problems that Bitcoin has. They're not really problems, but there are things that Bitcoin cannot do. So this is just kind of describing all that stuff. So yeah, man, it's the wording is definitely throwing me off a little bit, but we're gonna continue so that way we can power through this. All right, so next is blockchain blindness. So UTXO are blind to blockchain data such as nonce, the timestamp, and previous block hash. This severely limits applications in gambling and several other categories by depriving the scripting language of a potentially valuable source of randomness. So that sucks. No gambling for the degens. Thus, we see 3 approaches to building advanced applications on top of cryptocurrency: building a new blockchain, using scripting on top of Bitcoin, and using meta protocol on top of Bitcoin. Building a new blockchain allows for unlimited freedom in building a feature set, but at the cost of development time, bootstrapping effort, and security. Using scripting is easy to implement and standardize, but it's very limited in its capabilities. And meta protocols, while easy, suffer from faults in scalability. With Ethereum, we tend to build an alternative framework that provides even larger gains in ease of development, as well as even stronger light client properties, while at the same time allowing applications to share an economic environment and blockchain security. And now we get to Ethereum. So, the intent of Ethereum, 1 hour and 10 minutes into the podcast, is to create an alternative protocol for building decentralized applications providing a different set of trade-off that we believe will be very useful for large class of decentralized applications, with particular emphasis on situations where rapid development time, security for small and rarely used applications, and the ability of different applications to very efficient are and the ability of different applications to very efficiently interact are important. Ethereum does this by building what is essentially the ultimate abstract foundation layer, a blockchain with a built-in Turing-complete programming language, allowing anyone to write smart contracts and decentralized applications where they can create their own arbitrary rules for ownership, transaction formats, and state transition functions. A bare bones version of Namecoin can be written in 2 lines of code, and other protocols like currencies and reputation systems can be built in under 20. Smart contracts, cryptographic boxes that contain value and only unlock if certain conditions are met, can also be built on top of the platform, with vastly more value than that offered by Bitcoin scripting because of the added powers of Turing completeness, value awareness, and blockchain awareness and state. Ethereum accounts. In Ethereum, the state is made up of objects called accounts, with each account having a 20-byte address and state transitions being direct transfers of value and information between accounts. An Ethereum account contains 4 fields: a nonce, which is a counter used to make sure each transaction can only be processed once; the account's current ether balance; the account's contract code, if present; the account's storage, empty by default. Ether is the main internal crypto fuel of Ethereum and is used to pay transaction fees. In general, there are 2 types of accounts: externally owned accounts, controlled by private keys, and contract accounts, controlled by the contract code. An externally owned account has no code, and one can send messages from an externally owned account by creating and signing a transaction. In a contract account, every time the contract account receives a message, its code activates, allowing it to read and write to internal storage and send other messages or create contracts in turn. So this is the part where Ether, which everyone calls Ethereum, but the correct word for the token is Ether. So like if I have 5 ETH, then I have like 5 Ether, and the blockchain is called Ethereum. So that's an important distinction. So if someone says I have 5 Ethereum, they're using the word Ethereum to describe what is actually Ether. So that's how that
So if that
that's how that
happens,
works.
you basically go wrong.
Yeah, you could go wrong, or you could just be like, okay, whatever. It's like
You
it's
could be
like
a dick too. I mean, why not?
like what's in a name? When if a person says I have 5 Ethereum, they're not saying I own 5 blockchains. What they mean is I have 5 tokens. So there we go. Note that contracts and so this is what I was talking about before, right? So you can have your own externally owned account, so it's a fucking wallet, or you can have a contract account, which is somebody published code and they launched it and now it exists. Note that contracts in Ethereum should not be seen as something that should be fulfilled or complied with. Rather, they are more like autonomous agents that live inside of the Ethereum execution environment, always executing a specific piece of code when poked by a message or transaction, and having direct control over their own ether balance and their own key value store to keep track of persistent variables. Messages and transactions. The term transaction is used in Ethereum to refer to a signed data package that stores a message to be sent from an externally owned account. Transactions contain the recipient, a signature identifying the sender, the amount of ether to transfer from the sender to the recipient, an optional data field, a start gas value, representing the maximum number of computational steps the transaction execution is allowed to take, and a gas price value, representing the fee that the sender pays per computational step. The first 3 are standard fields expected in any cryptocurrency. The data field has no function by default, but the virtual machine has an opcode using which a contract can access the data. As an example use case, if a contract is functioning as an on-blockchain domain registration service, then it may wish to interpret the data being passed to it as containing 2 fields, the first field being a domain to register, and the second field being the IP address to register it to. The contract would read these values from the message data and appropriately place them in storage. The start gas and gas price fields are crucial for Ethereum's anti-denial of service model. In order to prevent accidental or hostile infinite loops or other computational wastage in code, Each transaction is required to set a limit to how many computational steps of code execution it can use. The fundamental unit of computation is gas. Usually a computational step costs 1 gas, but some operations cost higher amount of gas because they are more computationally expensive, or increase the amount of data that must be stored as part of the state. There is also a fee of 5 gas for every byte in the transaction data. The intent of the fee system is to require an attacker to pay proportionally for every resource that they consume, including computation, bandwidth and storage, including computation, bandwidth and storage. Hence, any transaction that leads to the network consuming a greater amount of any of these resources must have a gas fee roughly proportional to the increment. So this is something that I want to tackle real quick.
Yeah.
When you guys are getting hits from scammers or from cold callers or telemarketers or things like that, it costs them time to sit on the phone and talk to you. So the more of their time that is wasted, the less valuable the call is. So time is the thing that scammers and telemarketers and people of that nature, like, they have to spend in order to try and extract your money. And so as soon as the value ratio of like time to money they can win is off skew, then they fucking cut and run. So Ethereum does the same thing when they basically charge in order for you to like do stuff. So that's why Ethereum, that's one of the reasons why Ethereum is really cool and really nifty, is for that very reason. So I just wanted to touch on that and say, like, a way that you can stop scammers is by forcing them to expend value on the thing that they're trying to, like, scam you on. So
Well said, Will.
that's a good way to stop people. What was that?
Well said.
Thank you, sir. All right, so next up, we've got messages. So contracts have the ability to send messages to other contracts. Messages are virtually objects that are never serialized and exist only in the Ethereum execution environment. A message contains sender of the message, which is implicit, the recipient of the message, the amount of ether to transfer alongside the message, the optional data field, and the start gas value. Essentially, a message is like a transaction, except that it is produced by a contract and not an external actor. A message is produced when a contract currently executing code executes the call opcode, which produces and executes a message. Like a transaction, a message leads to the recipient account running its code. Thus, contracts can have relationships with other contracts in exactly the same way that external actors can. Note that the gas allowance signed by a transaction or other contract applies to the total gas consumed by the transaction in sub-executions. For an example, if external actor A sends a transaction to B with 1,000 gas and B consumes 600 gas before sending message to C, and the internal execution of C consumes 300 before returning, then B can spend another 100 gas before running out of gas. And there's some pictures. This is nerd stuff, so I'm gonna scroll past it. All right.
Nerd.
It's probably good information, but like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I know what it is. So we're gonna continue.
Yeah, yeah, kind of same here.
Let's
I'm not a coder.
see.
Sorry, guys.
Yeah, this is more code stuff, more nerd stuff. Oops, there we go. More code stuff, more nerd stuff. Oh, okay, here we go. Note that messages work equivalently to transactions in terms of reverts. If a message execution runs out of gas, then the message's execution and all other execution triggered by that execution revert. But parent executions do not need to revert. That means it's safe for a contract to call another contract, as if A calls B with G gas, and then A's execution is guaranteed to lose at most G gas. Finally, note that there is an opcode create that creates contract. Okay. I don't think I need to read the rest of that because this is all gobbledygook. Code execution. The code in Ethereum contracts is written in a low-level stack-based bytecode language, referred to as Ethereum Virtual Machine Code, or EVM code. The code consists of a series of bytes where each byte represents an operation. In general, code execution is an infinite loop that consists of repeatedly carrying out the operation at the current program counter, which begins at 0, and then implementing or incrementing the program counter by 1 until the end of the code is reached, or an error or stop or return instruction is detected. The operations have access to 3 types of space in which to store data: stack, First in, last in, first out container to which values can be pushed and popped. Memory, an infinitely expandable byte array, or the contract's long-term storage as a key store or a key value store. Unlike stack and memory, which reset after a computation ends, storage persists for the long term. The code can also access the value, sender, and data of the incoming message, as well as block header data. The code can return to byte array as data as an output. All right, this looks and I'm pretty sure is nerd stuff. So I'm
Yeah,
going to
he's like the
suggest-
EVM code is surprisingly simple. Like, dude, you can tell what was
Yep.
in Vitalek's head. And
Oh, yeah.
he's like,
Oh, yeah.
this is super simple. It's just look at this picture right here.
Mhm.
Like, this is something he knew so well how to code that
Yep.
he was just visualizing. Specifically, if I put in like a series of numbers and commands, this is like reality to
Yeah.
me.
I do like how it is not complicated. It's super easy to make something complicated. It's really difficult to make something simple. So I appreciate what he has done. So let's see. This looks like he's describing blockchain and mining. So the Ethereum blockchain is in many ways similar to the Bitcoin blockchain, although it does have some differences. The main difference between Ethereum and Bitcoin with regard to the blockchain architecture is that, unlike Bitcoin, Ethereum blocks contain a copy of both the transaction list and the most recent state. Aside from that, two other values, the block number and the difficulty, are also stored in the block. The basic block validation algorithm in Ethereum is as follows. All right, I'm not going to read that because that's some nerd stuff. The approach may seem highly inefficient at first glance because it needs to store the entire state with each block, but in reality, efficiency should be comparable to that of Bitcoin. The reason is that the state is stored in the tree structure, and after every block, only a small part of the Merkle tree needs to be changed. Thus, in general, between two adjacent blocks, the vast majority of the tree should be the same, and therefore the data can be stored once and referenced twice using pointers, hashes of subtrees. A special kind of tree, known as a Patricia tree, is used to accomplish this, including a modification to the Merkle tree concept that allows for nodes to be inserted and deleted and not just changed efficiently. Additionally, because of all the state information is part of the last block, there is no need to store the entire blockchain history, a strategy which, if it could be applied to Bitcoin, can be calculated to provide 5 to 20 times savings in space. Wah, wah. A common. Go ahead.
No, you're making me laugh over here.
Yeah, it's like it's just aha. Look at him. Look at him. Haha. If you could do it, we can save you 5 to 20% or 5 to
Nah.
20x. So, haha. Maybe they should call Geico. A commonly asked question is where contract code is executed in terms of physical hardware. This has a simple answer. The process of executing contract code is part of the definition of the state transition function, which is part of the block validation algorithm. So, if a transaction is added into block B, the code execution spawned by that transaction will be executed by all nodes now and in the future, and that download and validate block B. Applications. Ooh, this is, I think, a fun part, hopefully. In general, there's three types of applications on top of Ethereum. The first category is financial applications, providing users with more powerful ways of managing and entering into contracts using their money. This includes subcurrencies, financial derivatives, hedging contracts, savings wallets, wills, and ultimately even some classes of full-scale employment contracts. The second category is semi-financial applications, where money is involved, but there is a heavy non-monetary side to what is being done. A perfect example is self-enforcing bounties for solutions to computational problems. Finally, there are applications such as online voting and decentralized governance that are not financial at all. Token systems. On blockchain token systems have many applications ranging from subcurrencies representing assets such as US dollar or gold to company stocks, individual tokens representing smart property, secure unforgeable coupons, and even token systems with no ties to conventional value at all, used as point systems for incentivization. Token systems are surprisingly easy to implement in Ethereum. The key point to understand is that all a currency or token system fundamentally is a database with one operation. Subtract X units from A and give X units to B, with the proviso that 1, A had at least X units before the transaction, and 2, the transaction is approved by A. All that it takes to implement a token system is to implement this logic into a contract. The basic code for implementing token system in Serpent looks as follows. There you go. This is essentially a literal implementation of the banking system, state transition function described further above in this document. A few extra lines of code need to be added to provide the initial step for distributing the currency units in the first place, and a few other edge cases, and ideally a function would be added to let other contracts query for the balance of an address. But that's all there is to it. Theoretically, Ethereum-based token systems acting as subcurrencies can potentially include other important features or a feature that on-chain Bitcoin-based metacurrencies lack: the ability to pay transaction fees directly in that currency. The way this would be implemented is that the contract would maintain an Ether balance with which it would refund Ether used to pay fees to the sender, and it would refill this balance by collecting the internal currency units that it takes in fees and reselling them in a constant running auction. Users would thus need to activate their accounts with Ether, but once the Ether is there, it would be reusable because the contract would refund it each time. Financial derivatives and stable value currencies. Financial derivatives are... Go ahead.
Hey, stable value currencies. I wonder what that is.
Hey, there we go. Yes, this is where we start getting into the good stuff. Financial derivatives are the most common application of a smart contract, and one of the simplest to implement in code. The main challenge in implementing financial contracts is that the majority of them require reference to an external price ticker. For example, a very desirable application is a smart contract that hedges against volatility of Ether, or another cryptocurrency, with respect to the US dollar. But doing this requires the contract to know what the value of Ethereum over Ether, there I go, saying it myself, the value of ETH over US dollar is. The simplest way to do this is through a data feed contract maintained by a specific party, for example, the NASDAQ, designed so that the party has the ability to update the contract as needed, and providing an interface that allows other contracts to send a message to that contract and get back a response that provides the price. Given that critical ingredient, the hedging contract would look as follows. Wait for party A to input 1,000 Ether. Wait for party B to input 1,000 Ether. Record the USD value of 1,000 Ether calculated by querying the data feed contract in storage. Say this is X dollars. After 30 days, allow A or B to reactivate the contract in order to send X dollars worth of Ether calculated blah, 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 blah to A and the rest to B.
Yeah.
Such a contract would have a significant potential in crypto commerce. One of the main problems cited about cryptocurrency is the fact that it's volatile. Although many users and merchants may want the security and convenience of dealing with cryptographic assets, they may not wish to face the prospect of losing 23% of the value of their funds in a single day. Up until now, the most commonly proposed solution has been issuer-backed assets. The idea that an issuer creates a subcurrency in which they have the right to issue and revoke units and provide 1 unit of the currency to anyone who provides them offline with 1 unit of a specified underlying asset, i.e. gold or dollars. The issuer then promises to provide 1 unit of the underlying asset to anyone who sends them back 1 unit of the crypto asset. This mechanism allows for any non-cryptographic asset to be uplifted into a cryptographic asset, provided that the issuer can be trusted. In practice, however, issuers are not always trustworthy, and in some cases, the banking infrastructure is too weak or too hostile for such services to exist. Financial derivatives provide an alternative. Here, instead of a single user providing the funds to back up an asset, a decentralized market of speculators betting on the price of a cryptographic reference asset, for example, ETH, will go up, plays that role. Unlike issuers, speculators have no option to default on their side of the bargain because the hedging contract holds their funds in escrow. Note that this approach is not fully decentralized because a trusted source is still needed to provide the price ticker. Although arguably, even still, this is a massive improvement in terms of reducing infrastructure requirements. Unlike being an issuer, issuing price feed requirements no licenses and can be categorized as free speech. And reducing the potential for fraud. So this is actually pretty important here. So this is describing essentially what later on became like the difference between Tether and DAI, DAI. So like Tether is a company that when you send them a bank wire, or you mail them a carrier pigeon that's carrying like flakes of gold or whatever the fuck Tether takes in order to print Tether bucks, right? USDT. That's their first example. For the folks at home who have heard of Tether or USDC or other such cryptocurrency stablecoins that are like some of the larger ones. That's an example of the first thing that they describe in this paragraph. The second thing they
Yeah, that
describe in this
was
paragraph
US dollar
is like,
backed, basically.
yeah, yep. And like the second thing that they describe is DAI, DAI, that used to be one of the cooler things on Ethereum, where it's basically like a whole bunch of people, send in their assets to a smart contract, and the smart contract says, hey, those are worth DAI. So here you go. You get one DAI for every $1 worth of asset that you send into this thingamajigger. And then people are allowed to go and do the same thing with the DAI as they would do with the USDC or with the USDT, the Circle bucks or the Tether bucks. So
yeah, ultimately that's what MakerDAO. That's what he's describing right there. Basically, like, long story short, you do this: you put your ether, and then later on they allowed for different types of, like, USDC actually is one of the larger ones, but different types of cryptocurrencies to go into it. And basically what just ends up happening is, as soon as DAI starts losing its peg, well, then it goes to the market. Just automatically the contract goes to the market and sells the crypto, so that way it can gather more DAI, so that way it can repeg itself. And if it starts going above, because maybe too many people are doing that, right? Well, then it goes and sells the DAI and buys up the ether again. So it's kind of like it's an interesting mechanism and works brilliantly. But the long story short with MakerDAO is that you provide stableness by giving it the ether through a vault. You lock it up, and through that, then you mint the dollar amount of your ether, aka kind of like a lending platform, right? And then you pull that out.
Yes, and like I've never actually heard that described before so well. So that's a very good explanation, Nate. I like that. That's
Thank you.
I didn't know that like MakerDAO like buys and sells DAI and Ethereum and Bitcoin and other such things in order to maintain the peg. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really powerful. It's one of the most powerful systems, and it gets extremely close to what you may call magical money, because if you think about it this way, right? If Ethereum goes up in price, you can pull more DAI out of your vault. So if you could figure out a way to be able to get to pump the price of Ethereum, then you can like almost infinitely continue pulling more money out of DAI. That's why something like the P DAI was so big, because that was starting off at a cheap price, and then you would be able to peg it instantly, which then you basically, it's kind of like you were getting every dollar on just for 1 cent,
Mm-hmm. That's cool, man. I like that a lot. That's freaking neat. I'm looking up who made the DAI or the MakerDAO, and it's saying Rune Christensen. I remember that, like, I think, did he get like chopped up and like drowned somewhere, or
three. I can't remember if it was him specifically, but there were three.
Might have been one of the other guys.
Yeah, there were three of them that got disappeared, we'll say.
Oh, he might be. He's launching Sky on Solana. This Sky is
Sky.
the new. Their Skynet. The fucking. They literally, like the Terminator.
Yeah,
That's
Sky's
ridiculous.
the new DAI, and it's really stupid because they have a blacklisting function, which is exactly what USDC and Tether has, which is dumb. DAI was the most
defeats the purpose of
decentralized.
crypto, man.
It does, and DAI was the most decentralized stable coin available, and now that they're switching over to Sky, we've lost that decentral ability. So
I think that DAI will still work. It's just they're not doing more stuff with it, and they're making a new one. So like I don't think that they can undo the DAI code because it's launched, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, they are making a new stable coin. Fucking Skynet. It's fucking ridiculous.
So
Anyways,
stupid.
we're gonna get back to the white paper, because he's essentially just describing like, hey, you can create super cool things using Ethereum, including stable coins for transacting, because like you don't want to see 25% of your asset value drop in a day. So this is one of the cool. Oh, the cool thing is the identity and the reputation system. So this is what we were talking about earlier. So the
Yeah.
earliest alternative cryptocurrency of all, Namecoin, attempted to use a Bitcoin-like blockchain to provide a name registration system where users can register their names in a public database alongside other data. The major cited use case for a DNS system mapping domain names like bitcoin.org or in Namecoin's case, bitcoin.bit, to an IP address.
Hmm.
Other use cases include email authentication and potentially more advanced reputation system. Here's the basic contract to provide a Namecoin-like name registration
Yeah.
system on Ethereum, and this
So basically,
this
that's the
exists.
link tree.
Yep.
That's a link tree example, but that also that's real world assets ultimately right
Yep.
there. So that it's kind of like your platform to be able to build decentralization as well as non-fungibility directly on things that are actually in the physical world itself, which is like I can't believe that freaking Vitalek was thinking of these things all the way back then. It's just goddamn, he's smart. Holy hell.
So he's like describing like the Namecoin thing that already worked and how you can do it on Ethereum. Like now, I don't know when ENS was launched, Ethereum Name Service. So like the people.eth, like that was I want to say a couple years ago, but I don't like the point is like it's super cool and it exists. So like can't get that on Bitcoin, but you can do it on Ethereum. So ha ha ha.
He does that a lot
Let's
in this white paper.
yeah, exactly. Which that's the whole purpose of like why Ethereum was created. So it's like, hey, look, Bitcoin's limited, so we're gonna make another thing, and Bitcoin can do its thing, and we're gonna do our thing. We're gonna solve multiple problems here.
That's why he was ostracized.
Yeah. It, like he's the one that created like the Bitcoin the not the white paper, but the Bitcoin newsletter thing. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was a newsletter, like a paper or something.
Yeah, the Bitcoin magazine I think was started by Vitalik. But anyways, let's talk about how the naming service works. So the contract's very simple. All it is a database inside the Ethereum network that can be added to but not modified or removed from. Anyone can register a name with some value, and that registration then sticks forever. A more sophisticated name registration contract will also have a function clause allowing other contracts to query it, as well as a mechanism for the owner, i.e. the first register, of a name to change the data or transfer ownership. One can even add reputation and web of trust functionality on top. So that's pretty cool. Decentralized file storage. Over the past few years, there have emerged a number of popular online file storage startups, the most prominent being Dropbox, seeking to allow users to upload a backup of their hard drive and have the service store the backup and allow users to access it in exchange for a monthly fee. However, at this point, the file storage market is at times relatively inefficient. A cursory look at various existing solutions show that particularly the uncanny valley 20 to 200 gigabyte level, which at which neither free quotas nor enterprise level discounts kick in, monthly prices for mainstream file storage costs are such that you are paying more than the cost of the entire hard drive in a single month.
Wow.
Ethereum contracts can allow for the development of a decentralized file storage system where individual users can earn small quantities of money by renting out their own hard drives and unused space to be used to further drive down the cost of file storage. The key underpinning piece of such a device would be that we have termed the decentralized Dropbox contract. This contract works as follows. First, one splits the desired data up into blocks. Okay, I'm not going to read how it actually works, but the concept exists. So there you go. An important feature of the protocol is that although it may seem like one is trusting many random nodes not to just decide to forget the file, one can reduce the risk down to near zero by splitting the file into many pieces via secret sharing and watching the contracts to see each piece is still in some node's possession. If a contract is still paying out money, that provides a cryptographic proof that someone out there is still storing the file. Decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. So this is a good
DAOs are actually not bad, not a bad idea at all, because this is kind of like a committee, basically. It's a committee where everyone's always arguing at each other. Well, instead of being like, oh, I think my ideas are better, you basically pay for your ideas.
Exactly.
So the more money I pay, the bigger the vote I get.
Yep.
Hell yeah.
Yep. All right. Excuse me. So here we go. Launching into DAOs. The general concept of a decentralized autonomous organization is that a virtual entity has a certain set of members or shareholders which, perhaps with a 67% majority, have the right to spend the entity's funds and modify its code. Ooh, dude, maybe we can make a DAO for the DGen Roundtable. That'd be cool.
Whoever has more money.
Oh man, that's funny. The
I'm
members
a
would
whale.
collectively decide on how the organization should allocate its funds. Methods for allocating a DAO's funds could range from bounties, salaries to even more exotic mechanisms such as internal currency to reward work. This essentially replicates the legal tappings of a traditional company or nonprofit, but using only cryptographic blockchain technology for enforcement. So far, much of the talk around DAOs has been around the capitalist model of a decentralized autonomous corporation, a DAC, with dividend receiving shareholders and tradable shares. An alternative, perhaps described as a decentralized autonomous community, would have all members have an equal share in the decision making and require 67% of existing members to agree to add or remove a member. The requirement that only one person can have only one membership would then need to be enforced collectively by the group. Bro, why doesn't the DGen Roundtable create a DAO? Well, I don't know how they work or whatever, but this sounds really cool.
Yeah,
general
there's
outline.
different methods. Generally speaking, though, it does have to do with like the amount of the coin that you spend. So, like, you know, DRT coin, right? I think you
Yeah.
would be like a fucking Poseidon, and then I'd be like a
Yeah.
whale. And so
Yeah,
every
yeah.
single decision would basically rely on you and me just deciding what we want to do. Ultimately, that's kind of what it's kind of what a DAO does. And a lot of people this was last cycle. This was a part of the DeFi summer and all that, right? Because decentralized finance is kind of where things went crazy last cycle. That's where DAOs really came out strong. But people got really pissed off at the fact that it's like, oh, you get this one whale who threw $1 million at this coin, and then now me and my $1,000, it doesn't mean shit if I vote on anything, right? People got pissed at that. So this is where they kind of equalize things by having like a community where you sort of like combine, you know, you have 100 people with $1,000 of a coin, you put them all together, and then it's like, okay, well, now we're as big as that whale, right? And we can vote against them. So there's that sort of thing. And that's almost communistic, I swear to God. But there's different methods to voting, and we're still in the cryptocurrency space. We're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember those new. Oh man, I know there was new block explorers that were added. I don't like the standard block explorer, but I was going to take a look at the DGen Roundtable token distribution and see what we got.
Oh yeah, you could literally just go straight to deck screener, or
well, that doesn't tell you the token distribution. I don't think. It doesn't tell you about holders, or maybe it does. Oh, there's 187 holders of the DGen Roundtable token.
187. Wow, that's actually quite a few.
Yeah, that's interesting. 36,000 transfers. All right.
What the hell have you been doing?
The two largest. I can neither confirm nor deny. Let's see. How many people have over 1 million DGen Roundtable? Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9 accounts. 9 people. This is disincluding smart contracts that own more than 1 million DGen Roundtable tokens.
Oh, that's so suspicious because there's 9 of us.
There's 9 of us on the DGen Roundtable team. I mean, so like it was launched while I was driving and Josh was talking, and Mr. Crypto Sloth was like literally just showing everybody how to launch tokens. And so he was like, hey guys, this is how we launch it. And he put the entire thing in a liquidity pool. The entire DGen Roundtable supply was in a liquidity pool at the very beginning. So that's pretty cool. So I like that a lot. And so whoever bought some, and whoever didn't. And you know, that's where we stand with the DGen Roundtable token. But yeah, there's 9 individuals that hold more than 1 million of the 69 million tokens. And everyone else has, you know, 500,000. There's a lot of smart contracts that hold, you know, 80,000, 75,000. That's amusing. But anyways, we didn't come here to discuss the DGen Roundtable token. We came here to talk about DAOs and things. So This is pretty cool. I do like the tech, just like Mr. Fast Abdul. Shout out to Fast Abdul
Yes.
for joining us, and also I don't know if I have shouted out Paul Sachs. I think I did. Oh yeah, that's right, because he talked about the fourth turning earlier. So shout out to Mr. Paul Sachs. The fourth turning is here by Neil Howe and William Strauss. You would enjoy it, Will. He has a lot to do with psychotheory and sociology. Oh, I do like sociology. But shout out to you, and shout out to Mr. Fast Abdul, who's doing some pulse jitsu. He is here for the tech, and we're learning about the tech. We're learning about DAOs. We're learning about the Ethereum white paper. So, as you guys can see, this is the part that we're on right now. So let's see. Going back to the DAOs now that we're done talking about the DGen Roundtable. A general outline for how to code a DAO is as follows: the simplest way to design a piece of self-modifying code that changes if 2/3 of members agree on a change. Although the code is theoretically immutable, one can easily get around this and have a de facto mutability by having chunks of the code in separate contracts, and having the address of which contracts to call stored in the modifiable storage. So he's talking about how to make a DAO. I'm not going to really go through all of the stuff, but
Yeah.
so there's the nerd information.
Liquid
All right.
democracy. I love it.
Yes.
That's an amazing word.
All right, so let's see. The contract would then have clauses for each of these. It would maintain a record of all open storage changes, along with a list of who voted for them. It would also have a list of all members. When any storage change gets to 2/3 of members voting for it, a finalized transaction could execute the change. A more sophisticated skeleton would also have built-in voting abilities or for features like sending a transaction, adding members, removing members, and may even provide for liquid democracy.
Yeah, liquid
Style voting delegation.
democracy. It's the best.
Anyone
thing.
can assign someone to vote for them. And assign, okay, so this design would allow the DAO to grow organically as a decentralized community, allowing people to eventually delegate the task of filtering out who is a member to specialists. Although, unlike in the current system, specialists can easily pop in and out of existence over time as individual community members change their alignments. Man, I'm kind of curious to see what happened if we start a DGen Roundtable DAO. I wonder what goes into DAOs. This greatly intrigues me. All right, let's see. An alternative model for a decentralized corporation where any count can have 0 or more shares, and 2/3 of the shares are required to make a decision. A complete skeleton would involve asset management functionality, the ability to make an offer to buy or sell shares, and the ability to accept offers. Delegation would also exist liquid democracy style, generalizing the concept of a board of directors. Further applications.
Yeah, okay.
Savings wallets. Suppose that Alice wants to keep her funds safe, but is worried that she will lose or someone will hack her private key. She puts into a contract with Bob, a bank, as follows. Alice alone can withdraw a maximum of 1% of the funds per day. Bob alone can withdraw a maximum of 1% of the funds per day, but Alice has the ability to make transactions with her key, shutting off his ability. Alice and Bob together can withdraw anything.
Okay, so isn't that like cold storage?
This is using a DAO as a savings.
Okay.
Or not a DAO, but or maybe it is a DAO. Like using the smart contract as a storage. So
interesting. Yeah, that sounds quite a bit like cold storage, to be frank.
Yeah, I think it is similar. At least in use case, if not like technicalities.
Yeah.
So normally 1% per day is enough for Alice, and if Alice wants to withdraw more, she can contact Bob for help. If Alice's key gets hacked, she runs to Bob to move funds over to a new contract. If she loses her key, Bob will get the funds out eventually. If Bob turns out to be malicious, then she can turn off his ability to withdraw. Crop insurance. One can easily make financial derivatives contract, but using a data feed of the weather instead of any price index. If a farmer in Iowa purchases a derivative that pays out inversely based on the precipitation in Iowa, then if there is a drought, the farmer will automatically receive money, and if there's enough rain, the farmer will be happy because their crops would do well. This can be expanded to natural disaster insurance generally.
Well, now that's interesting.
Ooh, we've got some feedback from Mr. Johnny Chaos. Shout out to Johnny Chaos who has joined us. Unfortunately, DAO distribution prevents any real sort of democracy.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is just a selling point, making you feel like you have some kind of say. That sounds good.
Yep.
Maybe
Seeing that right there, that was the problem of last cycle, with all the DAOs, is because people started realizing, shit, it doesn't matter what I have to say. This whale is just going to take it over, basically.
Yeah. Maybe we could start a DGen Roundtable DAO and just like not do anything with it. It's just a fucking. It's just a
That'd
cool
be so
DAO,
weird, bro.
It would be. It would be weird, but it's like I don't know, just a fun thing. That's cool. Prevent any sort of real democracy, anyways. Well, I think that Johnny, they were talking about the DAX, the decentralized corporation. So where was that at? Fuck, I don't know. Anyways, they talked about different things. So let's see. So we last talked about crop insurance. So the next thing is decentralized data feed. For financial contracts for difference, it may be possible to actually decentralize the data feed via a protocol called Shelling Coin. Shelling Coin basically works as
Chilling.
follows. End parties all put into the system the value of a given datum. Therefore, like for example, Ethereum over US dollar. The prices are sorted, and everyone between the 25th and 75th percentile gets one token as a reward. Everyone has the incentive to provide the answer that everyone else will provide, and the only value that a large number of players can provide realistically agree on is the obvious default, the truth. This creates a decentralized protocol that can theoretically provide any number of values, including the Ethereum USD price, the temperature in Berlin, or even the result of a hard or particularly hard computation. That's interesting. It only rewards people in the middle of the bell curve. That's cool. So like if they say, "Hey, what's the price of this?" and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm going to go look it up." If everyone lies, then everyone gets rewarded. But like the odds of everyone lying, pretty slim because there's real data out there. So it would take like a lot of interesting consensus to kind of like break this sort of thing. That's pretty cool though. Shelling coin. All right, so another use case is smart multi-signature escrow. Bitcoin allows multi-sig transaction contracts where, for example, 3 out of a given 5 keys can spend the funds. Ethereum allows for more granularity. For example, 4 out of 5 can spend anything, 3 out of 5 can spend up to 10% per day, and 2 out of 5 can spend up to 0.5% per day. Additionally, Ethereum multisig is asynchronous. Two parties can register their signatures on the blockchain at different times, and the last signature will automatically send the transaction. Cloud computing. Ethereum virtual machine technology can also be used to create a verifiable computing environment, allowing users to ask others to carry out computations and then optionally ask for proofs that computations at certain randomly selected checkpoints were done correctly. This allows for the creation of a cloud computing market where any user can participate with their desktop, laptop, or specialized server, and spot checking together with security deposits can be used to ensure the system is trustworthy, i.e., nodes cannot profitably cheat. Although such system may not be suitable for all tasks, tasks that require a high level of inter-process communication, for example, cannot easily be done on a large cloud of nodes. Other tasks, however, are much easier to parallelize. Projects like SETI, at home, folding at home, and genetic algorithms can easily be implemented on top of such a platform. Peer-to-peer gambling. Any number of peer-to-peer gambling protocols, such as Frank Stahano and Richard Clayton's CyberDice, can be implemented on the Ethereum blockchain. The simplest gambling protocol is actually simply a contract for difference on the next block hash, and more advanced protocols can be built up from there, creating gambling services with near zero fees that have no ability to cheat.
Gambling with near zero fears.
Yeah, fees.
I wish.
Prediction markets. Providing an oracle or Shelling coin prediction markets are also easy to implement, and prediction markets together with Shelling coin may prove to be the first mainstream application of futarchy, or as a governance protocol for decentralized organizations. And then another one is on-chain decentralized marketplaces, using the identity and reputation system as a base. On-chain decentralized marketplaces. Hey, look at that. A
Hey, it
DEX.
sounds like a shit coin.
So those are pretty cool. All right. So miscellanea and concerts. Oh man. All right.
Ghost
Before we do
government.
that, we're
Oh,
gonna cover this Johnny Chaos chat that came in. Well, think about it having large proportion just because you had the money may not actually reflect your competency of making some decisions.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly.
People that can buy the votes get to make the votes. It's kind of how that's kind of how the United States political system works, doesn't it? The more votes you can buy, the more you can do things. Hey, so there you go. So DAOs reflect the U.S. political system. For progress, generally better to have a qualified and competent board over random buy-ins. Yes, I agree.
So basically, what Johnny is saying is that in a corporation, you have what's supposed to be the executive board, which knows the ins and outs of business. You know, they're supposed to be extremely competent, versus those companies lobby for these senators to make a certain choice to vote yay or nay on stuff. And which, you know, when you have something like Big Pharma paying off Mr. Oligarchy, it's the oligarchy, when Bernie Sanders, you know, he's paying him $10 million to vote yes or no, versus, you know, his salary at like, what is it, 125,000 or like 250,000 or something. And you're like, I wonder how he got so rich. Well, it's because he's bought and paid for.
Oh goodness, I lost my place. Hang on, let me scroll back down. I think I have an idea of where I was, but yeah, like the system turns out to not be as cool as we thought it was. You know, people buy the stuff.
There it is.
And then, you know, that's the politics.
Yeah.
So,
yep. Which is sad.
Yep. The next thing we're going to hop into is modified Ghost implementation. So,
that's interesting.
I don't know what this is, but we're about to find out. The greediest, heaviest observed subtree protocol is an innovation first introduced by those two guys that I'm not going to try and pronounce their name in December of 2013. The motivation behind Ghost is that blockchains with fast confirmation times currently suffer from reduced security due to a high stale rate. Because blocks take a certain time to propagate through the network, if a miner A mines a block and then miner B happens to mine another block before miner A's block propagates to B, then miner B's block will end up wasted and will not contribute to network security. Furthermore, there's a centralization issue. If miner A is a mining pool with 30% hash power and B has 10% hash power, then A will have a risk of producing a stale block 70% of the time, since the other 30% of the time A produced the last block and so will get mining data immediately. Whereas B will have a risk of producing a stale block 90% of the time. Thus, if the block interval is short enough for stale rate to be high, then A will be substantially more efficient simply by virtue of its size. With these two effects combined, the blockchains which produce blocks quickly are very likely to lead to one mining pool having a large enough percentage of the network hash power to have de facto control over the mining process. As described by these gentlemen, Ghost solves the first issue of network security loss by including stale blocks in the calculation of which chain is the longest. That is to say, not just the parent and further ancestors of a block, but also the stale descendants of the block's ancestor. In Ethereum jargon, uncles.
The hell?
Are added to the calculation of which block has the largest total proof of work backing it. To solve the second issue of centralization bias, we go beyond the protocol described by those two guys, and also provide block rewards to stales. A stale block receives 85% of its base reward, and the nephew that includes the stale block receives the remaining 25 or 12.5%. Transaction fees, however, are not awarded to uncles. Sorry, uncle, you get no fees.
Screw you, uncle.
Ethereum implements a simplified version of Ghost, which only goes down 7 levels. Specifically, it is defined as follows. A block must specify a parent, and it must specify 0 or more uncles. An uncle included in block B must have the following properties. Must be a direct child to the kth generation where something 2 is less than k is less than 7 or something. Oh, less than or equal to. It cannot be an ancestor of B. Okay, I'm not going to run through all of these limitations. This limited version of Ghost, which Uncle, I don't even know if this stuff is relevant for me to read. So this describes basically like how they fix fast block times with Ghost stuff. So are you interested in learning about this stuff, Nate?
No, we've already moved past that. Like they've upgraded the hell out of that, and so it's something else entirely.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to go into fees. Because every transaction published to the blockchain imposes on the network the cost of needing to download it and verify it, there is a need for some regulatory mechanism, typically involving transaction fees to prevent abuse. The default approach used in Bitcoin is to have purely voluntary fees, relying on miners to act as the gatekeepers and set dynamic minimums. This approach has been received very favorably in the Bitcoin community, particularly because it is market-based, allowing supply and demand between miners and transaction senders to determine the price. The problem with this line of reasoning is, however, that transaction processing is not a market. Although it is intuitively attractive to construe transaction processing as a service that the miner is offering to the sender, In reality, every transaction that a miner includes will need to be processed by every single node in the network. So the vast majority of the cost of transaction processing is borne by third parties and not the miner that is making the decision of whether or not to include it. Hence, the tragedy of the commons problems are very likely to occur. That's what we were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
Nate, when we were talking about like how Bitcoin transactions get fucking stupid high. So
Yeah, exactly.
this is literally the tragedy of the commons. So, yep, very likely to occur. And we've seen them occur. So, haha, suck it,
Yeah.
Bitcoin. Ethereum sounds like it's solving it. However, as it turns out, this flaw in the market based mechanism, when given a particular inaccurate simplifying assumption, magically cancels itself out. The argument is as follows. Suppose that a transaction leads to K operations offering the reward KR to any miner that includes it where R is set by the sender and K and R are roughly visible to the miner beforehand. An operation has a processing cost of C to any node, i.e. all nodes have equal efficiency. There are N mining nodes with exactly equal processing power, and no non-mining full nodes exist. The miner would be willing to process a transaction if the expected reward is greater than the cost. Thus, the expected reward is K times R divided by N. Since the miner has that math chance of processing the next block, the processing cost of the miner is simply that thing. Hence, the miners will include transactions where this equals that, all the
Jesus.
math. Note that R is the per operation fee provided by the sender and is thus lower bound to the benefit the sender derives from the transaction. And NC, North Carolina, is the cost of the entire network together of processing and operation. Hence, miners have the incentive to include only those transactions for which the total utilitarian benefit exceeds the cost. However, there are several important deviations from those assumptions in reality. The miner does pay a higher cost to process the transaction than other verifying nodes, since the extra verification time delays block propagation and thus increases the chance the block will become a stale. There do exist non-mining full nodes. The mining power distribution may end up radically egalitarian in practice. Speculators, political enemies, and crazies whose utility function includes causing harm to the network do exist, and they can cleverly set up contracts where their cost is much lower than cost paid by other verifying nodes.
Love how he calls them crazies. That's great.
Yep. One provides a tendency for the miner to include fewer transactions, and two increases North Carolina. Hence, these two effects at least partially cancel each other out. 3 and 4 are the major issue. To solve them, we simply institute a floating cap. No block can have more operations than this, that, or the other number, times the long-term exponential moving average. Specifically, there's some math. This is another factor disincentivizing large block sizes there is another factor disincentivizing large block sizes in Bitcoin. Blocks that are large will take longer to propagate, and thus have a higher probability of becoming stales. In Ethereum, highly gas-consuming blocks can take longer to propagate, both because they are physically larger and because they take longer to process the transaction state transitions to validate. This delayed disincentive is a significant consideration in Bitcoin, but less so in Ethereum because of the Ghost protocol. Hence, relying on regulated block limits provides a more stable baseline.
It's really weird how he says physically bigger. It's
Yeah.
nothing about this is physical.
Well, the gigabytes used to be stored on CDs. That was like a physical size, and then now they're stored on USBs, and then they're stored on microchips.
Well,
so
he's talking about gas consuming blocks though. And
oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that those data nodes of the blocks, right, are physically larger. It's just you can like I said before, you can view into his mind about how he's actually thinking about this code as being a real thing. So like if he's typing out code, he's physically like imagining himself holding, this hairbrush that I have over here. This is how he's coding. This is how I code a hairbrush, holding a hairbrush. It's like it's just fascinating. It's a special mind, that is for sure.
Yeah. I'm man, like we're 3/4 of the way through, but it's like I am just like being blown away so far. So this is going to be good. So let's find out about computation and Turing completeness. An important note is that Ethereum Virtual Machine is Turing complete. This means that Ethereum Virtual Machine code can encode any computation that can be conceivably carried out, including infinite loops. EVM codes allows looping in two ways. First, there's jump instruction that allows the program to jump back to a previous spot in the code, and
Hey.
a jump I instruction to do conditional jumping, allowing for statements like while blah 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 blah. Second, contracts can call other contracts, potentially allowing for looping through recursion. This naturally leads to a problem. Can malicious users essentially shut miners and full nodes down by forcing them to enter into an infinite loop? The issue arises because of a problem in computer science known as the halting problem. There is no way to tell, in the general case, whether or not a given program will ever halt. Did you have a thought, Nate? I heard you.
Yeah. So basically, what he's talking about right here at the very beginning, being able to go back in time, that ultimately is why pulse chain people talk about like, oh, we can always just go back if they screw something up. But then also that's what happened in during that hack where they ended up switching it to Ethereum 2.0 rather than Ethereum Classic. And then and then the looping. That's a fascinating idea. Basically, you would put enough data in there that would cause the node to think, like, go back in time and think, wait a minute here, that was wrong. Let me go look at it again. Wait a minute here, that was wrong. Let me go look at it again. And it's an interesting it's an interesting idea. And yeah, ultimately, like, an attacker could just basically blow up your node or whatever. And technically speaking, if you think about what the possibilities are with something like that, is you could blow up enough of the nodes to make it more centralized, basically for yourself. You could send out enough DDoS type attacks, to be able to just reduce the amount of these nodes, by like 70%. So therefore, there's 70% less objection, or what is it? Objects in your way to be able to steal the Ethereum. Like it is pretty fascinating stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to jump into the next part. As described in the state transition section, our solution works by requiring a transaction to set a maximum number of computational steps it's allowed to take. And if the execution takes longer, computation is reverted, but fees are still paid. Messages work in the same way. To show the motivation behind our solution, consider the following examples. An attacker creates a contract which runs an infinite loop, and then sends a transaction activating that loop to a miner. The miner will process the transaction running the infinite loop and wait for it to run out of gas. Even though the execution runs out of gas and stops halfway through, the transaction is still valid, and the miner still claims the fee from the attacker for each computational step. An attacker creates a very long infinite loop with the intent of forcing the miner to keep computing for such a long time that by the time the computation finishes, a few more blocks will have come out and it will not be possible for the miner to include the transaction to claim the fee. However, the attacker will still be required to submit a value for start gas, limiting the number of computational steps the execution can take. So the miner will know ahead of time that the computation will take an excessive large of steps. An attacker sees a smart contract code with some form, like this thing, and sends a transaction with just enough gas to run the first step but not the second, i.e. make a withdrawal but not letting the balance go down. The contract author does not need to worry about protecting against such attacks because if execution stops halfway through, the changes get reverted. A financial contract works by taking the median of 9 proprietary data feeds in order to minimize risk. An attacker takes over one of the data's feeds, which is designed to be modifiable via variable address call mechanism designed in the section on DAOs, and converts it to run an infinite loop, thereby attempting to force any attempts to claim funds from the financial contract to run out of gas. However, the financial contract can set a gas limit on the message to prevent this problem. The alternative to Turing completeness is Turing incompleteness, where jump and jump I do not exist and only one copy of each contract is allowed to exist in the call stack at any given time. With this system, the fee system described and uncertainties around the effectiveness of our solution might not be necessary, as the cost of executing a contract would be bounded above by size. Additionally, Turing incompleteness is not even that big a limitation. Out of all the contract examples we have conceived internally, so far only one require a loop, and even that loop could be removed by making 26 repetition of a one-line piece of code. Given the serious implication of Turing completeness and the limited benefit, why not simply have a Turing incomplete language? In reality, however, Turing incompleteness is far from a neat solution to the problem. To see why, consider the following nerd stuff. There you go.
Nerd.
Now sender transactions. Okay. Okay. Yeah, fuck it. I'll read this until I get bored. Now send a transaction to A. Thus, in 51 transactions, we have a contract that takes up to 2 to the 50th power computational steps. Miners could try to detect such logic bombs ahead of time by maintaining a value alongside each contract specifying the maximum number of computational steps that it can take, and calculating this for contracts calling other contracts recursively, but that would require miners to forbid contracts that create other contracts, since the creation and execution of all 26 contracts above could be easily rolled into a single contract. Another problematic point is that the address field of a message is variable, so in general, it may not even be possible to tell which other contracts a given contract will call ahead of time. Hence, all in all, we have a surprising conclusion. Turing completeness is surprisingly easy to manage, and the lack of Turing completeness is equally surprisingly difficult to manage unless the exact same controls are in place. But in that case, why not just let the protocol be Turing complete? Currency and issuance. The Ethereum network includes its own built-in currency, Ether, which serves the dual purpose of providing a primary liquidity layer to allow for efficient exchange between various types of digital assets and, more importantly, of providing a mechanism for paying transaction fees. For convenience and to avoid future argument, see the current that thing debate in Bitcoin, the denominations will be pre-labeled. Wei, Zabo, Finny, and Ether. So, I wonder if Wei is where Gwei comes from.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
Ether
It'll be
is,
like G-Way.
Oh, that's cool.
Also, I think the current MBTC and UBTC, I believe, associated debates in Bitcoin. Yeah. So I do believe that is what you may call what's the real Bitcoin, BTC or Bitcoin Cash.
That could
That was
be it.
back in that day. I'm pretty sure
I
that's what
think
it was.
I think MBTC, UPTC, and Satoshi are like the denominations of like the token logarithmically. So like Wei is 1/100,000th of an ether, right? That's what I
Oh,
think
you know what?
it
I think you're
means.
right.
And then Zabo is like more, and then Finny is more, and then ether is the like one ether is 10 to the 18th power of Gwei or some shit. I don't know. I think I might be wrong, but anyways, it's fucking. There's currency and issuance. This should be taken as an expanded version of the concept of dollars and cents, or BTC and Satoshi. In the near future, we expect Ether to be used for ordinary transactions, Finny for microtransactions, and Zabo and Wei for technical discussions around fees and protocol implementation. The remaining denominations may become useful later and should not be included in clients at this point. The issuance model will be as follows. Ether will be released in a currency sale at the price of 1,000 to 2,000 Ether per Bitcoin, a mechanism intended to fund the Ethereum organization and pay for development that has been used with success by other platforms such as Mastercoin and NXT. Earlier buyers will benefit from larger discounts. The Bitcoin received from the sale will be used entirely to pay salaries and bounties to developers and invested into various for-profit and non-profit projects in the Ethereum and cryptocurrency system. 0.099x the amount total sold, a big number, looks like 60 million Ethereum, will be allocated to the organization to compensate early contributors and pay Ethereum-denominated expenses before the Genesis block. This number, or 0.099x the total amount sold, will be maintained as a long-term reserve. 0.26x the total amount sold will be allocated to miners per year forever after that point.
Wow.
So,
by the way,
there's
so
distribution.
when he's talking about 1,000 to 2,000 per Bitcoin, as of currently price wise, right? It's about 50. It's about 58 or 53 is what I calculated. Oh my god.
Ooh,
yeah, it's
so bad.
53 and a half Ether per Bitcoin. So people who got in super early in the Ether.
Oh yeah.
Dude, yeah, good. Wow. What, man, that's insane, bro.
So that's the ETH Bitcoin dominance chart right there from start to where we're at currently. And like even with the current ETH BTC ratio being down, like from the beginning, you're looking pretty fucking good. So
oh yeah, very much green.
So this is like the long-term inflation rate predicted of.
Does it say the years on there?
No, I'm not really sure what these things mean on the bottom.
Okay.
Linear currency issuance. I don't know. I'm guessing these are percents. Fuck if I know. The two main choices in the above model are one, the existence size of endowment pool.
I like it.
Okay, so this talks about distribution. So I'm not worried about the distribution. Hey
Yeah,
guys,
that's
guess
already
what?
gone through.
At some point, they gave Ethereum to people. All right. Ooh, this is actually important. The permanent linear supply growth model reduces the risk of what some see as excessive wealth concentration in Bitcoin and gives individuals living in present and future eras a fair chance to acquire currency units, while at the same time retaining a strong incentive to obtain and hold Ether because of the supply growth rate, as a percentage still trends to zero over time. We also theorize that because coins are always lost over time due to carelessness, death, etc., and coin loss can be modeled as a percentage of the total supply per year, that the total currency supply in circulation will in fact eventually stabilize at a value equal to the annual issuance divided by the loss rate. Note that in the future, it is likely that Ethereum will switch to proof of stake model for security, reducing the issuance requirement to somewhat between near zero and 0.05x per year. In the event that the Ethereum organization loses funding or for any other reason disappears, we leave open a social contract. Anyone has the right to create a future candidate version of Ethereum, with only one condition being that the quantity of Ether must be at most equal to 60 million, where n is the number of years. 60 million times this stuff, where n is the number of years after the Genesis block. Creators are free to crowd sell or otherwise assign some or all of the difference between the piece of shit proof of stake driven supply
Yes.
expansion and the maximum allowable supply expansion to pay for development. Candidate upgrades that do not comply with the social contract may justifiably be forked into compliant versions. Mining centralization. Here's a juicy part. The Bitcoin mining algorithm works by having miners compute SHA-256 on slightly modified versions of the block header millions of times over and over and over again, until eventually one node comes up with a version whose hash is less than the target, currently around 2 to the 192nd power. However, this mining algorithm is vulnerable to two forms of centralization. First, the mining ecosystem has to become dominated by ASICs, application-specific integrated circuits. Computer chips are designed for, and therefore thousands of times more efficient at, the specific task of Bitcoin mining. This means that Bitcoin mining is no longer a highly decentralized and egalitarian pursuit, requiring millions of dollars of capital to effectively participate in. Second, most Bitcoin miners do not actually perform block validation locally. Instead, they rely on a centralized mining pool to provide block headers. This problem is arguably worse. As of the time of this writing, the top three mining pools indirectly control roughly 50% of the processing power in the Bitcoin network. Although this is mitigated by the fact that the miners can switch to other mining pools if a pool or coalition attempts a 51% attack. The current intent at Ethereum is to use a mining algorithm where miners are required to fetch random data from the state, compute some randomly selected transactions for the last n blocks in the first blockchain, and return the hash as the result. This has two important benefits. First, Ethereum contracts can include any kind of computation. So an Ethereum ASIC would essentially be an ASIC for general computation, i.e. a better CPU, central processing unit. Second, mining requires access to the entire blockchain, forcing miners to store the entire blockchain and at least be capable of verifying every transaction. This removes the need for centralized mining pools. Although mining pools can still serve the legitimate role of evening out the randomness of reward distribution, this function can still be served equally well by peer-to-peer pools with no central control. This model is untested, and there may be difficulties along the way in avoiding certain clever optimizations when using the contract execution as a mining algorithm. However, one notably interesting feature of this algorithm is that it allows anyone to poison the well by introducing a large number of contracts into the blockchain specifically designed to stymie certain ASICs. The economic incentives exist for ASIC manufacturers to use such a trick to attack each other. Thus, the solution we are developing is ultimately an adaptive economic human solution, rather than a purely technical one. Scalability. One common concern about Ethereum is the issue of scalability. Like Bitcoin, Ethereum suffers from the flaw that every transaction needs to be processed by every node in the network. With Bitcoin, the size of the current blockchain rests at about 15 gigabytes, growing by about 1 megabyte per hour. If the Bitcoin network were to process Visa's 2,000 transactions per second, it would grow by 1 megabyte per 3 seconds, 1 gigabyte per hour, 8 terabytes per year. Ethereum is likely to suffer similar growth pattern, worsened by the fact that there will be many applications on top of the Ethereum blockchain instead of just a currency, as is the case with Bitcoin. But ameliorated by the fact that Ethereum full nodes need to store just the state instead of the entire blockchain by history, or instead of the entire blockchain history. The problem with such a large blockchain size is centralization risk. If the blockchain size increases, say, to 100 terabytes, then the likely scenario would be that only a very small number of large businesses would run full nodes, with all regular users using just light SPV nodes. In such a situation, there arises the potential concern that full nodes could band together and all agree to cheat in some profitable fashion. For example, change the block reward, give themselves Bitcoin. Light nodes would have no way of detecting this immediately. Of course, at least one honest full node would likely exist, and after a few hours, information about the fraud would trickle out through channels like Reddit, but at that point it would be too late. It would be up to the ordinary users to organize an effort to blacklist the given blocks, a massive and likely infeasible coordination problem on a similar scale as that of pulling off a successful 51% attack. In the case of Bitcoin, this is currently a problem, but there exists a blockchain modification suggested by Peter Todd which will alleviate this issue. In the near term, Ethereum will use two additional strategies to cope with this problem. First, because of the blockchain-based mining algorithms, at least every miner will be forced to be a full node, creating a lower bound on the number of full nodes. Second, and more importantly, however, we will include an intermediate state tree root in the blockchain after processing each transaction. Even if block validation is centralized, as long as one honest verifying node exists, the centralization problem can be circumvented via a verification protocol. If a miner publishes an invalid block, that block must either be badly formatted or the state is incorrect. Since the state is known to be correct, there must be some first state that is incorrect where the other state is correct. Excuse me. The verifying node would provide the index I, along with proof of invalidity consisting of the subset of Patricia tree nodes needing to process this, that, or the other thing. Nodes would be able to use those nodes to run that part of the computation to see that the thing generated does not match the thing provided. Another more sophisticated attack would involve malicious miners publishing incomplete blocks, so the full information does not even exist to determine whether or not the blocks are valid. The solution to this is a challenge response protocol. Verification nodes issue challenges in the form of a target transaction indices. And upon receiving a node, a light node treats the block as untrusted until another node, whether miner or another verifier, provides a subset of Patricia nodes as a proof of validity. Conclusion. The Ethereum protocol was originally conceived as an upgraded version of cryptocurrency. Actually, real quick, Nate, do you have any thoughts before we hop to the conclusion on the mining stuff?
No. You're on a roll,
sweet.
man.
So conclusion. The Ethereum protocol was originally conceived as an upgraded version of cryptocurrency, providing advanced features such as on-chain blockchain escrow, withdrawal limits, financial contracts, gambling markets, and the like via a highly generalized programming language. The Ethereum protocol would not support any of the applications directly, but the existence of a Turing-complete programming language means that arbitrary contracts can theoretically be created for any transaction type or application. What is more interesting about Ethereum, however, is that the Ethereum protocol moves far beyond just currency. Protocols around decentralized file storage, decentralized computation, and decentralized prediction markets, among dozens of other concepts, have the potential to substantially increase the efficiency of the computational industry and provide a massive boost to other peer-to-peer protocols by addressing for the first time an economic layer. Finally, there is also a substantial array of applications that have nothing to do with money at all. The concept of an arbitrary state transition function, as implemented by the Ethereum protocol, provides for a platform with unique potential. Rather than being close-ended, single-purpose protocol intended only for a specific array of applications in data storage, gambling, or finance, Ethereum is open-ended by design, and we believe that it is extremely well-suited to serving as a foundational layer for a very large number of both financial and non-financial protocols in the years to come.
Okay, so the crazy thing is that the way he just described that is that the layer one, the foundation, the protocols themselves, protocols are literally nothing more than just more data that has been put in. More coding that has been put on top of what he's already created, like plugged in. So you like, if you were to look at it this way, right? This is why I call it like the Pulse Chain City, right? The Ethereum city. It's because what he's done is he's built like the roads and everything there. He's got everything all set up. He's got the ground, right? He's got the land. Okay, well now you can start build buildings on there, right? You can start making electrical systems, stuff like that. And that's ultimately what the protocols are.
Yep. There's a good little conclusion. Do we want to touch on these notes in further readings? I don't know. Nope. Nope, we're not going to do it. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that article was useful. There you have it. The Ethereum white paper, brought to you by the Roundtable of a whole bunch of degenerates. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out. If there's any questions you guys have, feel free to throw them in the comments. Feel free to throw them up in our Telegram. Feel free to chit chat and hang out with us. Let's see. There are no new chat shoutouts.
DRT, join now. You gotta join, man. Get into our Telegram. Like every single day, we got people in there that are just absolutely going wild with the market. Exactly what's going on. And I'll tell you what, like Jay, Dace, and the rest of them, when they go live inside of that Telegram channel, like it's just nothing but winning going on. So yeah, you guys absolutely need to be getting into that Telegram.
Yep. So this is how, for those of you guys that are watching us live, the way that you join the DGen Roundtable Telegram, I've put in the live chats a link to join. You just click on that link right there. For those of you guys that are not watching us live and don't have access to the live chats, it's at the bottom of the screen. For those of you guys that are only on Replay Gang or listening, then you just type in t.me/DRT join now, and that's how you get on in. Again, that is t.me/DRT Delta Romeo Tango join now, all one word. Or you can scan the QR code that you see on the bottom right hand corner of the screen. So with that being said, Mr. Nate, where can the folks find you, and what have you got going on in the near future?
You can find me all over the place, all of the socials on at The Ascending Man. I have my X directly below there, as you can tell. Go give me a follow there. I'm always putting out more information. I've been releasing a video every single day on my official YouTube, The Ascending Man. So yeah, just go ahead, go give me a subscribe over there. Make sure you subscribe for all of those on Kick and Twitter, on Twitch. Give me a subscribe as well. Follow me. Yeah, I'm going to be keeping up with this stuff, doing a lot of fun things. It's all about fun, man. Like it's good to learn more about cryptocurrencies and become rich and all that, but it's also a lot of fun to be able to just kind of sit back and laugh at idiots around the world, or just silly things that are happening, right? And maybe even I'll stream some of my games too. Why not? If I'm gonna sit here and have a good time on gaming, maybe I'll do some of that streaming as well. So again, give me a subscribe and or a follow.
Sweet. Are you doing anything other than making the content stuff? Anything you want to announce for the folks at home? Any cool streams you plan on joining with other people's or anything?
Yeah, actually, so I'm not 100% sure if I'm actually going to do this or for how long I'm going to do it, but I'm probably going to be moving over to the Effin' Hangout with RG, and yeah, probably just be hanging out and having a good time.
Cool beans. So you guys can check him out over there at Discourse Syndicate, I believe is their YouTube channel.
Discourse Syndicate, that's correct.
Hell yeah. Well, I will go ahead and let the folks know where they can find me. Similar to what I posted earlier on in the chat, you guys can find all of my socials linked off of my Pulse Chain domain name, will.pls.fyi. You can find my Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, the Linktree thing that has like DGen Roundtable stuff and other things that I do in my life. All that's posted up over there. And that's where you can find me. As far as things that are going on in the near future, the DGen Roundtable is we're going to have our standard Sunday show on Sunday, where we will either be doing campfire stories or we'll be reading some really cool things that are going on in the world. I believe that we've got a couple people for that, so that'll be fun. Let's see. That's DGen Roundtable stuff. Next week, I don't think we have anything crazy planned for Whiskey Wednesday, so just look forward to a fantastic, super cool, and awesome Whiskey Wednesday. And then as far as the next book club goes, we're finally covering Roger Ver's Hijacking Bitcoin. I believe that Zenith will be hosting that one. So look forward to that, and it'll be a good time. And we're going to learn a whole lot about the stuff that has been talked into Bitcoin and the Ethereum white papers when Roger Ver hops on in there. So, or excuse me, when we cover Roger Ver's book, which is a great book. I highly suggest you guys read it just so you can hear the other side of the Bitcoin narrative from like some of the OGs back in the day. So that's what's going on with the DGen Roundtable. That's what's going on with me. That's what's going on with Nate. I want to remind you guys to like that smash button and know that none of the stuff that we talk about here on the DGen Roundtable is financial advice. And with that being the case, it's time to go ahead and end this show. So I want to thank all of you for spending your valuable time with us here on the DGen Roundtable. As Agent J often says, we know that time is your most valuable asset, and we appreciate you investing it right here with us. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Will Stevenson, but more importantly, you have been watching the DGen Roundtable. Mr. Producer, which is me, go ahead and get that trigger finger ready, because it's time to remind all the folks at home to remember to DGen responsibly.
DGen responsibly.
Still, something familiar about this place. I don't know.
What the fuck, Will?
I feel like we're being watched.
I wonder.
Now all I gotta do is find this
He's like,
Yoda.
oh shit. Brilliant.